Hi everyone, thank you for your patience. Apologies for the delay. All right, let's talk about EB-1A final merits. So, chose this topic in particular because I've been coming across a lot of people who have gotten 4 or 5 criteria approved, but have still been getting denied on final merits. So I thought I would talk about this in particular. So let's first look at what it means to get denied on final merits. So when you get denied on final merits, what the officer is really saying, and that, at least based on what I've been hearing from immigration lawyers, is they're saying that you presented all this evidence, but that you haven't really shown that you've risen to the top of your field. As in, you've done activities, you met the criteria on a plain language level, probably, but that everything in totality doesn't really show that you've risen to the top of your field. And that could be because you didn't define your field properly. Perhaps that could have been because your evidence just wasn't relevant enough, didn't make sense. So if you're in that situation, what should you do to strengthen your final merits, to potentially prevent another denial? There is generally no universal thing you could be doing, but there are a couple of ways to potentially strengthen the final merits of your profile based on conversations with immigration lawyers. One is independent references. So getting other top industry experts, the top industry experts outside of your field to independently verify that what you have said about your expertise or claim, your impact on your field, that what you have said is what you have said. And to have them also talk about how they think you've risen to the top of your field, if that is really what they can say. Getting those kinds of references, especially from some very established experts, can help with final merits because that's essentially directly strengthening your argument for how you risen to the top of your field. They can also look at the evidence that you presented and provide further explanatory context. They can look at the evidence that you have presented, these experts, that is, and say, this is how this piece of evidence helps with maybe this other piece of evidence that in totality shows that you have risen to the top of your field. Now, that's something that you can get simply by, well, a couple of ways. You can talk to people who know the people you already know. You can get involved in more prestigious opportunities within your field, and that's how you can meet some of these top experts. It's not as simple as you're just going to get independent references from top experts simply by reaching out to them. It's going to take a lot more. It's going to mean showing up in the right places, going to the right kinds of events, and then probably just asking them if they can help support your application. I mean, there's really no way around. There's really no other way around collecting these kinds of references except for, instead of just emailing these people, showing up to places where they usually hang out and then just asking them up front. After, of course, having a conversation with them, or maybe helping them with something that they need help with. Maybe it's some sort of research they need help with, or some project they're doing, or you just happen to meet these people because you're involved in a particular advisory board. There are a lot of ways to meet these kinds of industry experts who can help testify on your behalf, affirm your claims. Because remember, when you get denied on final merits, what's really happening is you're being told your evidence as a whole does not show that you've risen to the top of your field. Now, how do you plug that hole? You go and find more evidence that helps make the argument for how you've risen to the top of your field. And yeah, one way is to get independent references from top industry experts. You can also target prestigious opportunities in your field. You can go speak at top conferences. You can get covered by some of the top publications in your field. That's directly helping with final merits because you are adding to your bank of evidence that shows that you've risen to the top of your field. With this approach, and I'm not saying you should do independent references or target prestigious opportunities, do both, and they're usually related, because if you target prestigious opportunities, you'll come across industry experts who may be very open to commenting on your work and providing that support for your application. But prestigious opportunities, you would still also have to explain the prestige behind these opportunities. You would have to explain how someone who's never worked in your field would be able to understand the opportunities that you are targeting to be prestigious. Definitely something you will want to explain as well. Having more relevant evidence is also something that you will want to think about if you want to improve the final merits of your profile. A lot of profiles I've seen that seem to have this issue, they tend to take a very certain form, a very specific form. So for the industry professional, it's usually they have a really strong leader and critical role, but then all their other evidence is very disjointed, fragmented, not really related to their leading a critical role. Maybe they've spoken at quite a few academic conferences. Maybe they've reviewed quite a few academic papers, but ask them about industry recognition within their field, and there's no evidence for that at all. They haven't spoken at a single conference in their field. They haven't judged a single industry-related opportunity. So the argument you're putting forth with that kind of profile is, I'm a top industry expert with no external recognition for my industry expertise, only academic recognition, which is just a very odd argument to present if you want to show that you've risen to the top of your field as an industry professional. So in that case, you would include more relevant evidence. Evidence that showcases your industry expertise, judging particular industry events that are related to your field of expertise. Or it could be publishing in the right industry publications to show that you are a recognized thought leader in your space. Something else to consider. So sometimes it just takes a bit of thought around your case narrative. As in, like, what are you really trying to say with your evidence? A lot of you don't really have that in mind when it comes to profile building. And it's fine to start doing activities to try to check off the criteria, but at some point you're going to have to deal with the absence of strong final merits, because you'll have a profile that has a bunch of activities, but you just won't really have a profile that says anything about how you've risen to the top of your field. So really keep that in mind as well. What are you trying to say about how you've risen to the top of your field? How are you saying it? Are you showing enough acclaim? Are you showing enough expertise? Are you showing enough impact on your field if that's something that you want to rely on to show that you've risen to the top of your field? All of these components have to work together for your final merits to make sense, to be strong. And if these components seem disjointed, or they don't really seem to show how you've risen to the top of your field, as based on the example I just described, for example, you could claim that that person with the industry expertise, but just academic evidence, they don't have the external recognition that most industry experts in their field would have, and that's why they haven't really shown that they've risen to the top of their field. That's a valid counter argument. So you really have to think about what gaps are currently in your profile that are stopping you from showing that you are at the top of your field. And something else that you could potentially look into is what other top experts in your field, what they look like. What conferences are they involved with? Who says they're a top expert? Are other top experts in your field saying that this person is a top expert? Because if so, then that is strong evidence. Maybe you are of the same caliber. Then try to mirror that. Try to get other top experts to say you are a top expert. And if you can't, are you really a top expert? Is how the argument would go. So you can also look to see what other top experts are doing, what they look like in your field, and then see what characteristics you can draw from them and then implement into your own profile. That is another way to approach final merits. You can also, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this for industry professionals, but if you worked on something high profile, media coverage could be something to target, because showing that you are recognized in mainstream media or trade specific media, you're showing up in the publications that get read by all the top professionals in your field, or by in the media outlets and publications that everyone knows about. That's widespread acclaim. That could be beneficial for your final merits. So it's really thinking about what is currently missing in your profile that's stopping someone who has never worked in your field, the officer, from concluding that you have risen to the top of your field. That is what you want to be thinking about when it comes to final merits. And if you're in a situation where you have 4 or 5 strong criteria, getting approved for those, but then getting denied on final merits, perhaps it's because there are these gaps in your profile that stop you from showing how you've risen to the top of your field, that stop you from communicating your understanding of how you've risen to the top of your field. Because it's not really about what you say, it's not really about what you claim, it's about whether you can prove what you say, whether you can prove what you claim. So yeah, that's just a bit about final merits. Anyone have questions? Feel free to start asking questions in the chat. Anyone have final merit? Questions about final merits? Or just questions about EB-1A profile building? I can also talk a bit about some of the strongest profiles that I've seen with EB-1A. I mean, with current RFEs and noids, just because you have a strong profile doesn't mean you're definitely going to get approved, but I have seen quite a few strong profiles, and their evidence tends to just tie together. It's that totality element. You need everything to make sense as a whole. And that usually seems to start with a well-defined field of expertise. These people are able to say that this is my field of expertise. It could be this is the problem I help solve within my field. I solve it better than 99% of other people in my field. And you can see this through the outcomes I've created through my work. You can see this through the references that say that I solve this problem really well. You can see this through the activities externally that I've done, for which I've gotten recognition for my expertise, where I've applied my expertise in solving these problems. You can see this through some of the publications that they have contributed to, where they have talked about their expertise in solving these problems that make them a top expert in their field. So you'll see in this thread that everything just seems to make sense. everything ties together. There's no like disjointed, fragmented activities. Just there's no. It's not like things are just like fragmented, disjointed. There's nothing sticking out. It's not like they have like some random journal article that has nothing to do with their field of expertise, just like lying around in their authorship, or they have like they say they're an expert in this field, but then they have no external recognition for that expertise. Everything's just what their company says, which is still possible for strong final merits, in that it's not like you need external acclaim, but it could help. Ren asks, what are the common reasons for RFE, even though you have enough evidence pointing to final merits or sustained acclaim? If you speak to lawyers, they will say they don't know themselves, but they're based on some conversations I've had with them. Because like it's not like RFEs are always reasonable. If you talk to lawyers, they'll tell you that some RFEs are quite arbitrary. But then there are some RFEs that just come from things not really making sense. So like you have evidence. It's like going back to the example I was talking about. Because final merits is not a defined standard nor sustained acclaim, when you have profiles that may not correspond to an officer's understanding of what a certain profile should look like, that's when you get an RFE. So if, for example, an officer thinks that all industry professionals should have significant external acclaim from industry, not just academia, if you present a profile with just a bunch of journal articles, but then you're like some sort of engineering manager, that wouldn't really make sense in showing how you've risen to the top of your field, because the pushback could be, if you're such a top engineering manager, why are you not published in the top engineering manager publications? Why are you not covered in these conferences? Why are you not doing these kinds of judging activities? So when there's that disconnect, that could potentially lead to an RFE. But then because there's no established standard for what final merits actually means, like it means have you shown you've risen to the top of your field? But even that is subjective. That's when you, because it's so subjective, it's really when there's like a disconnect between the officer's understanding of final merits for a particular profile and what you've actually presented. And sometimes that disconnect is quite repairable, in that if it's like, going back to the example, you're an industry professional, but you just have academic recognition, then get more industry recognition, get more external acclaim. If you're such a top industry expert, why has no one in your industry invited you to the top opportunities? Like, you're claiming that you're at the top, so why is no one inviting you? So that's valid pushback. Anyone else have questions? I can also talk a bit about a claim. So a claim matters because if you are a top expert in your field, as you claim you are, getting recognized for your expertise should be a part of your argument. Because how else would you expand on that argument? Like if your work is so noteworthy, if it's so impressive, if it's so excellent, then shouldn't other top industry experts say that it's excellent, say that it's impressive, say how they've used your work? And that's something that a lot of people don't really think about, because they only think about expertise when it comes to EB-1A. They think, I need to show I have a really high level of expertise, get a bunch of people at my company to say that I have a very high level of expertise, and then that's that. That's all. Well, not really. Because if you look at top experts in most fields, they will probably have external recognition as well. It's not just their company saying they're a top expert, it's the field as a whole. There are all these experts constantly providing testimonials as to how this person's work has is of such a high standard that they therefore see this person as at the top of their field. If you can't get those testimonials, then I would say that's a missed opportunity. Not necessary, but it's something to really think about. And that's probably why original contributions, if you can claim it well, tends to help a lot with your profile, helps really strengthen profiles in general if you can claim the criterion. Because if you can show significant impact on your field through the outcomes of people who have used your work, for example, top companies in your field using your work to produce significant commercial outcomes, that's far more than just expertise. It's showing significant influence in your field. And that is another component of showing that you're a top expert. You have influenced your field. You have reshaped your field in some way. When you think about experts in general, it's not just that they have a high level of knowledge in their field. That knowledge is novel, it's innovative, it's new, and it's being used, it's being applied. Think about some of the top people in tech, for example, the top experts. They're usually the people who have advanced the field in some way. And then they get recognized for advancing the field. So yeah, that's probably why original contributions, if you can claim it, can be such a strong criterion for final merits. Because meeting that threshold just helps a lot with showing that you've risen to the top of your field, because it's just what experts do mostly when it comes to most fields. They're able to present a level of expertise that then helps reshape the field. Anyone else have questions? Anyone have questions? Is it okay if only 2 organizations using your contribution to claim the OC criterion? Possibly, if they're 2 of the biggest companies in your space. Yeah, but it depends on also the magnitude of your contributions. Have you been able to contribute in a way that indicates that these companies have been able to produce significant outcomes. Something to keep in mind. What is your recommended structure for a founder's application? It's a very broad question, but generally your leading or critical role is going to be what you do as a founder of your company. But if you're the founder, then it's probably not going to be an issue to prove leading or critical role. You will, depending on the stage of your company, you will probably want to, depends on the stage of your company, but generally it's leading a critical role. Judging and authorship, or judging authorship membership. These are some of the criteria that I've seen founders target. Membership tends to be possibly mentoring at top incubators, or mentoring or advising VCs. For authorship, and this is a tech founder context. Judging and authorship tend to be focused on judging hackathons, demo days, sometimes reviewing conference submissions. Authorship tends to be publishing in founder-focused publications, sometimes founder-focused media. Yeah, those are this is for a tech founder, but those are some of the criteria that I've seen targeted. Sometimes original contributions, but much harder depending on the stage of your application. Stage of your company. Anyone else have questions? Anyone else have questions? Do I help people with jobs? No, I don't. I don't know what that means. Mentoring in your field at reputed ed tech platforms, which criterion can be claimed as an industry professional? Mentoring could be judging if you're reviewing the work of others. It really depends on what kind of mentoring. But if you're looking more at judging, I would say mentoring hackathons or demo days. That's more the kind of activity that would count towards judging. If you're just mentoring people individually, that's probably not going to help that much. But it really depends. If you're mentoring people individually as part of an incubator, that could be judging because you're reviewing their work and they are your counterparts. But it really depends on a case-by-case basis. When assessing original contributions of major significance for EB-1A, do you generally prioritize open source or public contributions, or can impactful internal company work also be positioned effectively? Possibly impactful company work, but it would have to be company work that that's been adopted in your field in some way by other top companies, and then you can directly tie your work to what's been created out of that adoption. Open source or public contributions, I have seen that. Like some people have like these GitHub repos that are used, these like open source libraries that have 10,000 plus stars on GitHub. That could be an argument for original contributions. You would have to prove the significance of the usage of your work, though. Significance and impact. What kind of impact have you had on the people who have used your work? And can those outcomes be considered significant outcomes? That's something you're going to have to prove as well. You're going to have to look into. What are the ways you could gather evidence on the original contribution when you don't have company-wide email or spot awards, even though the project itself is critical for the company? Well, critical for the company is not original contributions. Original contributions is something you've done within your field that has impacted your field that other companies have used to produce their own significant outcomes. That has nothing to do with something you've done internally. It rarely has to do with what you've done internally within your company, unless you can show that company work has somehow been adopted by other companies in your field. I mean, if that's the case, then you would have references to start. Maybe some sort of mention of how these companies have used your work, but I don't really see that often. I mean, there could be exceptions, of course. Most of the editorial boards do not have sufficient documentation that show extraordinary abilities and expertise are required. How do we use this for the membership? Depends on what kinds of editorial boards. If you're talking about some of the top industry publications in your field, they will definitely be able to provide some sort of letter that talks about how you were selected, why you were selected, who tends to get selected. They don't have to use the term extraordinary ability, nor do these kinds of letters tend to include this kind of language, because it would be quite odd to do so. And yeah, that's how you would make an argument for membership, because how you were selected, why you were selected, how people are generally selected, that tends to be able to help with outstanding achievements. But of course, with anything related to membership, definitely not something that is, definitely something that is not. Yeah, you can't just really, you're going to have to make an argument for what outstanding achievements actually means. Because a requirement for membership is outstanding achievements. That is going to be the evidentiary standard for membership. Anyone else have questions? For infrastructure DevOps or platform engineers, where contributions are often indirect or enable others' work, how can those enabled effects be framed as original contributions of major significance? Yeah, so there are a couple of ways. For tech in general, one form of original contributions is you created some sort of open source library, and now that's being used by everyone in your field because it's such a good open source library, and then it's produced significant outcomes for a bunch of companies that have adopted it. That's original contribution, one example. But it's not really about like the other form of original contributions that a lawyer told me about is if something that you've done has inspired the work of other top companies, and then they provide references saying that they were directly inspired by your work and then used your ideas. So you could make the argument that something that you did within DevOps, for instance, maybe some sort of standard you created, maybe some project you created that gained a lot of popularity in the field of DevOps, and then other companies started using the standard you created or started using your project as some sort of archetype to follow. And then that led to major advancements and significant outcomes for the companies that used your ideas. That could be original contributions. But you have to be able to thread. Yeah, you'll have to create some sort of thread in that you will have to tie the contributions you have made to maybe some project or some sort of standard, something you did, something that represents your ideas, implemented ideas. Thread that to something that other top companies started to do. And then thread that to the impact of what they did using your ideas. And that can be possible not just through company work. It could be maybe you pioneered some sort of standard within some sort of professional organization, and then that led to other companies using that standard. That's also possible. Anyone else have questions? Anyone have questions? All right, if no one else has questions, thanks everyone for joining today's live stream. Hi everyone. How's everyone doing? So yeah, feel free to start asking questions in the chat. I can also cover a few things that I've been doing on my end. So I'm getting a lot of questions from just people in different fields who want to get more profile building opportunities. And I think the one thing that is applicable to pretty much every field is outreach. So if you want to start landing opportunities, you need to be messaging people who are organizing those opportunities. I mean, it's not really, it's not, it doesn't get more complicated than that. It's just doing a lot of outreach, messaging a lot of people. So right now I'm averaging probably 100 to 200, sometimes even 300 messages a week. That's what seems to have worked in general in landing opportunities. It's not like I just send like 2 messages and I get like 5 opportunities. That's not really how it works. It is more like sending 100 messages, getting like 30 connection requests accepted, and having like 2 people reply. Anyone have questions? Any questions? But yeah, that's the one thing that I tell people to do in general. It is to do a lot of outreach. And something else that someone reached out to me and said really helped them with profile building was realizing that they could just tell a story about their work and then use that as a way to land judging opportunities or other profile building opportunities. It's always useful to show how your expertise can help someone who's organizing an event, someone who edits for a journal. You want to be always showing how your expertise is relevant to some of these people that you are approaching. You don't want to just reach out and then kind of leave things unclear or generic. You want to show that you've actually researched before making an ask. You want to show that you are mindful of their needs. This goes not just for events, it goes for reaching out to reporters. In fact, that's something that a lot of people have been asking me about. So I don't really do as much reporter outreach anymore as I used to. A month ago, I was doing like 20 to 50 messages to reporters, but now I do like maybe like 3 to 5 a month. But I'm still getting replies from reporters. I just shared the contact of a former Business Insider reporter within my newsletter. So I'm still getting replies. The thing with reporters, especially the ones that are more high profile or have a lot of work out there, is that you can't really dictate to them what they should be covering because they're not going to listen to you. They tend to already have their own coverage needs or have needs in mind, and it's really up to you to find opportunities for you to fit within their needs. So a lot of people think that reporters are just going to listen to whatever they have to say, and that in order to get covered by a reporter, you just have to present a strong story. Yes, that does apply in some circumstances. For example, I recently added a Wired reporter to my contacts database within my newsletter, and I think like at least 50 people reached out to him, and he covered one person who had a really interesting story to tell. So, I mean, there are situations where you can present a really interesting story that is highly relevant to the reporter, and then they might modify the coverage needs to support your needs. But usually it's just finding a match between their existing needs and what you can offer. And that just comes down to reaching out to a lot of the right reporters. And the right reporters, you don't really know in general. You don't really know if they're the right reporters until you actually have a conversation with them. So the best thing you can do is just to do a lot of reporter outreach. Just message them on LinkedIn, email them. A lot of them check emails all the time, so you can always just, message them or email them. Hi, Henry. Anyone have questions? Anyone have questions about how to land profile building opportunities? So we can talk more about outreach. A lot of outreach is not just about going to events. I mean, going to events is a great way to meet more people, but I think the more efficient, I mean, a lot of you have full-time jobs and probably only have like an hour or two for outreach a day, if at all, probably 30 minutes realistically. I think doing a lot of outreach on LinkedIn is really what helps with landing a lot of profile building opportunities. And what you want to do is you want to find the opportunities you want to get involved in or the organizations you want to get involved in first, and then come up with a list of people that you can reach out to see if they know the organizers of a particular event that is of interest to you, or to a particular, or maybe they're the organizers themselves. How many such opportunities events should one do for filling for the visa? There is no such thing as a threshold for these opportunities in general. It's not really about the number of opportunities. It's more about how strong of an argument you can present for how you've risen to the top of your field for EB-1A and O-1, where O-1 is top 25% or so. For EB-1A, it's top 3 to 5%, or even top 3%. For NIW, it's more about your proposed endeavor. Can you show that you're well positioned for your proposed endeavor? Can you show that your proposed endeavor has substantial merit, and those activities and opportunities should show that you are actually in a good position to carry out your proposed endeavor? Yeah, so it varies. Hi, Tyrant. Anyone have questions? But yeah, going back to what I was talking about, I think it's more realistic to do outreach for 30 minutes a day, every single day, and target organizations and opportunities that you have found, and maybe attend one in-person event a week if possible, or every 2 weeks. It's not absolutely necessary to attend in-person events. I mean, it's good to attend events that are highly relevant to your field because you can just have those conversations with people. But if you only have, say, 30 minutes a day, then you should really just be doing a lot of online outreach. That is actually something that can also help with landing a lot of these profile building opportunities. And that is actually what I've been doing, except I've been doing 100 to 300 messages a week to help some of you land profile building opportunities. Do speaking opportunities at conferences help? Yes, especially if they can show that you are a top expert in your field with a high level of expertise, because that contributes to your argument that you're risen to the top of your field. So yeah, it does. Speaking opportunities do help. Anyone have questions? Any other questions? Anyone have questions? Jason, for judging roles, would a mixture of peer reviews and judging hackathons help a case? For EB-1A, yes, just make sure you're judging industry professional focused hackathons. They can allow students as well. They just can't be just student hackathons. But generally, yes, for O-1 and EB-1A, a mix of those two activities can help with judging. Those activities can also help with EB-2 and NIW if that is what you are asking about, but they will have to be related to the proposed endeavor that you are focusing on as part of your case. But yes, those two are good examples of judging roles to take on. And then there are also other kinds of judging you can do, like reviewing submissions for a conference, reviewing submissions, speaker submissions, reviewing committee applications. There are also quite a few other types of judging opportunities that you can look into. Anyone else have questions? Anyone have questions? Would reviewing conference papers help? Will this come under judging criteria? What's number to review? Papers, yes, this does help. This counts as peer reviewing. There is no specific number. You do not. I just don't think that's the right question to ask anymore. It's more about whether you are doing high quality activities. And if you constantly keep getting high quality opportunities, I think you should just take on as many of them as possible, unless you're at a point where, and I have encountered very few people at this point. I can think of one person who is at a point where he doesn't need more profile building, but he is still profile building. He's profile built to a point where he's just getting so many opportunities, and he's an extremely strong profile. I think he's the only example of a person I would say does not need more profile building. So if you ask like what number, I would say you probably just don't have enough papers reviewed right now. If you are just getting more high quality papers to review and you're getting more and more of these requests, just take on as many of them as possible, is what I'm going to say for this question, since it comes up all the time. And the only people who should be limiting themselves is people who have the kind of profile that I've only seen in one person. And he has a C-suite role, so he already has an extremely strong leading or critical role. Have an opportunity to do workshops at a local tech community. Do you think I can benefit from that? It depends on what kinds of workshops. You could turn those workshops into judging opportunities potentially. You could try to ask for some sort of judging to happen at the end of the workshop. It really depends on what kind of workshop though. But I have seen more workshops where there have been more judging opportunities at the end, where the instructor reviews the work of attendees. That is something you can potentially look into as well. Is this specific to EB-1A, or do you cover NIW as well? NIW I do cover. It's just very based on your proposed endeavor. Also, the standards of activities are not as high as for EB-1A. So for example, judging a student hackathon could potentially help with your NIW, but probably will not help with EB-1A. Hi, Jason. I am in the data center construction industry. Do you have any suggestions for finding co-authors for papers? I think you might want to speak. You might want to introduce yourself in the private group chat that I have going on. That is a place to look at. You might also want to just reach out to people who are a part of IEEE and are in your industry. You can just reach out to them and then ask if they are working on papers and to see if they would want to have co-authors like you. Speaking at conferences or key panel discussions during conferences help. What criteria it will be? probably leading a critical role or even final merits, depending on the kinds of conferences you're referring to. But generally speaking, you'll want to present at conferences where you can show that you have a high level of expertise, and you can show that by the nature of the talks that you give, and or the people who are attending the conference and listening to your talk. How do you define high quality? In the case of EB-1A or O-1, anything that helps show that you have risen to the top of your field, anything that is generic, that is nondescript, that people would just kind of like forget about if they're in your field and would probably say it is not indicative of a high level of expertise in your field, is probably not going to be high quality. Mentoring and hackathon would help. It helps you with meeting more top professionals in your field and potentially getting access to more judging opportunities. Outside of that, it is not as useful as, say, being an official judge, especially for an industry-focused hackathon. Also, to get roles for judging, is there a basic requirement, threshold to overcome? Depends. You need to have the expertise that is required to judge the hackathon. Each hackathon is different. Outside of that, it just comes down to doing a lot of outreach. So I've probably said this many, many times already. You need to be doing a lot of outreach, not just 2 messages a week or 5 or even 10 messages a week, probably 100 to 300. I think that's where outreach becomes incredibly useful. If you are consistently hitting 300 messages a week, you will probably end up in a spot where you will have so many judging opportunities that you just won't know what to do with them. And I have encountered several people who have been doing that, and they have been getting so many opportunities that they just don't know what to do with them. Also, I can just briefly go into some of my profile building resources. So for those of you who have been seeing some of my posts, as part of my newsletter, so I currently run a paid newsletter for $12 per month. As part of my newsletter, you will also get access to some of my newsletter resources, which includes a profile building opportunities database that currently lists over 400 opportunities categorized by field and criteria. These are just examples of opportunities that you can start looking into to start building your profile. Some of these opportunities are extremely high profile, so you will definitely want to look into them. These are just examples of starting points for getting involved in your field. I also share a bunch of video resources as part of my newsletter. So these are just recorded conversations with EB-1A recipients. Some of them are insight sessions with people who actually got approved and are in my private group. But these are just some of them, and this is a Q&A with an IEEE section chair. So these are just recorded conversations and workshops with people who are relevant to a lot of you who are profile building. So outside of that, I also run a private group which is a part of my newsletter again, which is where members have been able to find co-authors for papers, have been able to find opportunities shared by other members, and have also been able to find collaborators in general for profile building. So as part of this group, you can just work with a bunch of people who are also profile building, and you will most likely find someone who is also in your field who is profile building. What is your feedback on Forbes Technology Council membership? Is it holds good value? Probably not. I've seen it many, many times. It's just, yeah. If you have some sort of compelling angle that shows how this indicates that you're risen to the top of your field, then probably, but I've seen it so many times that I don't think it really holds that much value. Yeah. It's also not clear what you get as a member, at least to me. Maybe I haven't looked at it enough, but no one has come to me and said I was part of the Forbes Technology Council, and as a result, I was able to directly work with CEOs on thought-provoking, thought leadership pieces. I haven't seen that. So it's not that strong to me. Anyone have questions?
Recommended places to start reaching out depends on your field, but most likely you can just search things like your field and in conference, apply to speak or call for speakers or call for judges like that. Use those kinds of terms. You can also talk to people who are in your field and ask them what they are doing, and that just comes down to searching for these people on LinkedIn. How many fellowship membership are enough? There's no such thing as enough for the membership criterion, short of maybe like the top fellowship in your entire field. It's not really about the number of fellowships. It's more about the quality of what you are doing and how it shows you have risen to the top of your field. In fact, I have seen people with BCS now get questioned even though they have BCS. And it is probably because, I mean, this is my guess, it's probably because BCS is coming up a lot. Like a lot of officers are just seeing BCS over and over again. So as a result, it's becoming more commonplace. Like a lot of people, I see a very clear difference between, there's a certain type of profile builder that just keeps doing activities that no one has ever heard of, but clearly show that they have risen to the top of their field. They do not ask questions about what specific thing should I go for. They are more about going out there and having conversations, which then lead to opportunities that people have never heard of, but can still show they've risen to the top of their field. Then there's another type of profile builder that goes for specific generic opportunities that come up that everyone is doing. And because someone got approved and they did this specific opportunity, therefore that opportunity must be the gold standard. But that's not really the case. That's just an assumption a lot of you are making. So I would move away from having this checklist mentality of like, how many opportunities do I need? How many fellowships do I need? Does this count? And more towards what kinds of activities can I be doing that actually show that I've risen to the top of my field? And that could be one single opportunity for one criteria. It's possible to have one single membership help you claim the entire membership criteria. It just comes down to how strong of an argument you can make for fulfilling the criterion, membership being something that has a requirement that requires outstanding achievements, that sort of thing. You need to be able to understand first the criterion and then show that the activity meets the criterion and also that it shows that you're risen to the top of your field. That is the mentality you need to be embodying and not how many activities do I need? How many check boxes do I need to check to build a strong profile? It's not really like that. Do judging student hackathons at uni sponsored by industry leaders like Google, MS, Morgan Stanley hold value for NIW? Depending on your proposed endeavor, yes. Yeah, it depends on your proposed endeavor though. Is your newsletter specific to EB-1A or do you cover tech-related endeavor for NIW? It is for EB-1A, NIW, and O-1, and it's because all activities for all three are all related. They're all about showing, well, EB-1A and O-1 are about showing how you've risen to the top of your field, but NIW is also about showing how you are well equipped, for example, to pursue your proposed endeavor. And that is related to NIW. Anyone else have questions? What is your view on high salary criteria? Heard mixed feedback. USC officers are not honoring it anymore. Are you aware of it? I have not heard this from the lawyers I work with. It's usually based on base salary, 90th percentile for your particular occupation within your particular state. That is one way to argue a strong high salary claim. But yeah, I haven't really heard anything about that. Anyone else have questions? Anyone have questions? What are your thoughts on the current state of profile building going on in the market, where it's a cookie cutter, all things done package? I have never suggested a cookie cutter, sort of all things done sort of package to look into, even before all this talk about this cookie cutter package stuff going on. I've never recommended that at all, even with the people I work with. Even my entire newsletter is focused on helping you build the mentality you need to go find your own profile building opportunities. It's not about prescribing certain things and saying that if you have these things, you will have a strong profile. I don't think there are very, very few opportunities out there that actually, if you take on, help you show a strong profile. Maybe like you're on the board of an IEEE society, that's pretty strong. But short of those kinds of activities, most of them don't really ensure you have a strong profile. So my thoughts have always been the same on this sort of profile building. If someone says you need to do these 10 things and then you have a strong profile, either they're recommending the very, very top opportunities, or it's just this kind of thing that they're recommending and it's just all cookie cutter. And I don't know, like maybe it works for like 2 out of 10 people, I'm not sure, but I've never recommended this sort of thing. And I still do not recommend this sort of thing. Yeah. What I do recommend is finding resources that teach you the mentality you need to build a strong profile, because that is still a primary misunderstanding of EB-1A, NIW, and O-1. People just don't know what it means to have a strong profile, and that is probably why they go for these cookie cutter solutions. Because someone is saying, oh, like I got approved for EB-1A, therefore I know what it actually takes, when there probably be just like one data point and like 100 other data points, and maybe there were like 90 other people who had their exact same profile who got denied. So that is another thing too. Just because someone got approved for EB-1A does not mean they're automatically someone you should be looking to for like a prescription. They might be able to provide tips based on their experiences of building their own EB-1A profile. But if someone's offering a prescription saying these 10 things, you do them, you get approved, you should stay away from that. But that's just my view. What are the best fellow membership options? There's no such thing. IEEE fellow, you get that, that's very strong. Outside of that, I have not really seen. There are probably some very niche examples in different fields, but I know for your particular field, IEEE fellow is pretty good. IET and BCS can help, but again, it's not about going for fellowships. It's not about going for these particular checkbox activities. If you can't tell a story about how you have risen to the top of your field, if you can't present a compelling narrative, having all of this checked off is not going to help as much as you think. I think that's where a lot of people don't really have enough going on, is they just have a bunch of random activities that don't really tie together and show that they've risen to the top of their field. That is a primary problem that I see in a lot of profile builders, especially senior professionals. How many string criteria do you recommend for approval? There is no particular number of criteria I recommend. Generally speaking, 4 to 5 if you want to have a pretty strong profile, but some people will actually get by with 3, depending on how strong the criteria are. All right, last question. When someone is ready, do you recommend reviewing with an expert to get EB-1A to get feedback on the EB-1 profile? Do you do that? I do that through my profile building columns. You can also speak to a lawyer, and they will base it on their adjudication experiences. I just base them on the profiles that I've seen. Yeah, so I do that. But it really depends on the field you're in. So I mostly look at tech profiles, but I've also looked at other fields, but mostly tech. All right, that is all for today's live stream. Thanks again for joining, everyone. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing? Welcome to the private live stream. So I was trying to stream my iPad as well to just be able to write notes on, but I guess that's not happening this time around. But I can still put something together. I can still like draw on like this. I can draw in free form or something like that, just to like illustrate concepts. But feel free to start asking questions. So this live stream is going to be more focused on how to actually profile build, because I keep getting questions from people from different fields, especially fields that I haven't really covered as much, especially people outside of tech. And they ask me, have you seen EB-1A profiles for this specific field? If not, is it possible to profile build? Well, the answer is if there are top professionals in your field, then it is possible to profile build for EB-1A, because EB-1A is about showing how you've risen to the top of your field. So yeah, that's what you need to show. And I can answer more specific questions around how to find profile building opportunities. So just feel free to start asking questions in the comments, and I can do like live demonstrations of what I would do if I was in your situation in profile building. And yeah, a lot of profile building just comes down to outreach and really understanding how to identify the right opportunities to look into. And I can also go a bit, so feel free to start asking questions, but I can go a bit into the most common misconceptions that I have come across in profile building. The most common one is thinking that doing a lot of activities in itself is going to be enough to build a strong profile, that doing a lot of activities is what matters, not doing a lot of high quality activities. So that's why you have people trying to go for media coverage, for awards, just getting as many of those criteria as possible. That is not how profile building works. You can present an extremely strong profile with just 3 criteria, or even 4. The person who has evidence for 7 criteria does not necessarily have a stronger profile than someone with 3 criteria. That's just something to keep in mind. But I'll revisit this point afterwards. Let's look into Harsh's question. I guess we start with my example. As I'm totally new to this profile building, I have MS degree and entry-level job in pharma manufacturing company. What should be my next steps? Okay, so if you are an entry-level professional, then you probably don't really have that strong of a leading or critical role, but maybe that's not accurate. Maybe you already have a lot of experience in maybe your home country or something like that, so it's not necessarily an indication that you don't have a strong leading or critical role claim. But if you are just starting off in your career, you should be focusing on, if EB-1A is your eventual target, focus on things like judging and authorship. Those are the 2 most straightforward criteria to meet. You can start getting involved in judging and authorship, and this you would do through, okay, that's pretty decent. So you would probably focus on judging authorship and perhaps membership, and you would do this by starting to get involved in membership organizations in your field. So let's say I'm in your position. This is what I would do. So I would probably, so say I'm looking for opportunities. So you say pharmaceuticals. So you would probably, this is what I usually do for like lots of different, just like finding activities in general. So I would look at, okay, where are these calls for speakers for pharmaceuticals related activities? So I would look, okay, it seems like this has an open call for speakers. So I would probably look for speaking opportunities to start. I mean, some of these are reserved for more high-level professionals, but these are just, this is what you would be doing to learn more about the conferences and organizations you want to get involved with. And then the reason why I say member organizations are so important is because the more member organizations you are involved with, especially at the junior level, the more likely you are to meet more top professionals in your field because of perhaps those in-person events that you will get to attend. So by attending those in-person events, you'll just get to meet more people, and then as a result, you will get to start learning more about the different conferences, studying opportunities, authorship opportunities out there, which will give you a firm foundation for eventually building a profile that shows that you've risen to the top of your field. So something I would do is like pharmaceutical member organization. So it seems like this does not seems to be more for companies. How about, let's look more. Okay, so maybe something like this. I'm not saying this is something that is definitely going to be a good fit for you, but something like this, for example, is just anything with chapters, anything with volunteering and anything with chapters is what you would want to look into. So this is a good sign. 40 plus 40 plus communities, so 40 plus chapters. This is definitely something to get involved with if it is related to your field. But this is just an example of a general example of the type of organization that you want to be involved with, because as you can see, these kinds of member organizations, everything's up to date. They have this conference coming up. They have webinars where you can contribute. So that's why member organizations are so important to get involved with for starting off. For memberships and share of these can matter, well, you're going to want to show more evidence than just I'm a general member. Remember, you're trying to make the argument that you've risen to the top of your field, so just showing that you are a general member, maybe attended a few activities, that is not going to be enough. You're going to want to show far more evidence for membership and just your profile in general. You will want to maybe get on some councils or committees within the organization, but everything starts with being a general member. That's just something to keep in mind. And my understanding is IEEE also has some stuff in pharma. Looks like this is something that is related to IEEE, so it's the Medicine and Biology Society, so that's just something possibly to look into as well. But going to the other questions, Avinash, can you also provide some insights for cloud DevOps engineers? I have 13 plus years experience working with multinational banks. So this is actually a field I know a bit more about. For cloud, there are quite a few opportunities that you can go for. And yes, Ellen, I will look into your questions as well. But I'm going to Avinash's question about cloud. This is essentially the same thing that I kind of do with cloud. And if you look at the profile building opportunities database that I have shared as part of my newsletter resources, which I can also link after I answer this question, which you all should have access to, and if you don't, send me an email. There are a lot of cloud computing opportunities, but it's essentially the same thing. This is what I do. Call for speakers. All right, so everyone's been talking about this. I think it's coming up soon, but for cloud, all right, this is stopped accepting speakers for cloud. CloudX is a good one to look into, and I think they do have volunteering opportunities as well. So this is definitely a good way to get involved, because this is one of my understanding is it's a part of, it's behind the organization that organizes this is behind Developer Week, and that is one of the largest developer conferences in the world. So maybe look into volunteering for CloudX, and then through the people you meet there, you can then look into Dev Network's advisory board, because they have a cloud advisory board which you can apply to. Yeah. So this is just something, these two are related because Dev Network helps organize CloudX. CloudX is one of the top conferences for cloud. They are also considering speakers on a rolling basis right now. Very limited number, but if you have 13 plus years of experience, perhaps you have a lot to contribute when it comes to cloud. Something else you can do is look into Linux Foundation. Linux Foundation has a ton of cloud opportunities. So even though this is closed, you can go to, you can attend some of these events. I think they have volunteering opportunities for this, but something like, oh wait, no, this already passed. But CNCF is what you want to look into. Calls for speakers. Okay, this is still open. I didn't even know this was still open. But yeah, CNCF is something else you want to get involved with. This is also open. But yeah, CNCF is definitely something you want to get involved with for cloud. So this is just what I would be doing. See, just by searching for cloud computing, call for speakers, I've already found a bunch of opportunities. Okay, so Ellen has a question. I've judged multiple hackathons as part of building my profile. Should I also get involved in peer reviewing journals to strengthen judging others' work criteria? Yes, peer reviewing is explicitly mentioned as evidence of judging in the USCIS policy manual. So you want to be reviewing for conferences. You don't have to review for very top research conferences, but you could be reviewing for, say, NIRIPS or Triple AI is another good one. And I also run an outreach group outside of the newsletter as well, and I've been finding a lot of peer review opportunities for people. I'm not sure if you've seen that, but I've been able to source 10 peer review opportunities so far with NIRIPS for that group in just a month. But generally speaking, you will want to get involved in Triple AI. You will want to get involved in IEEE CIS, Computational Intelligence Society. You want to get involved in Dev Network. You will want to get involved in ACM AI-related conferences. A couple of them I've come across recently that are looking for reviewers. You can just go on the ACM conference calendar and then just look for those AI-related ones. You can also go on IEEE's conference calendar, which has handy search functionality, and you can search for AI there. How to land judging opportunities, Avinash. It's just about journal opportunities. Publishing journals, it's just going to come down to answering calls for papers. So literally, a lot of the organizations I've mentioned have calls for papers. So if you go on Triple AI right now, you can definitely find some calls for papers. So let's do that right now. Calls for papers. Yeah. Well, not this, but if you look at their upcoming events, I've definitely come across. Yeah. If you look at their fall symposia, next fall symposia, call. I just came across. I already looked at this, so I know. As you can see, there are lots of symposia. This is one. August 1st, deadline for submission, calls for papers. That's how you can submit a paper and then try to get published. If you want to, and then same here, August 11th. And if you want to get involved in reviewing for these conferences, just email these people. Email all of them. Email literally every single one of these people to see if you can get involved in reviewing papers for them. Going back to the pharma field. Since I'm done with my academics and working in the industry, how do I start preparing the research papers or publications? So since you're a part of the group, there are a lot of pharma people in there. So introduce yourself in the group and then ask if anyone is working on papers. I also know someone who is working on papers, I think. So just ping me on LinkedIn and I will connect you with him because he is in pharma and he is doing a lot of profile building and he's actually doing the outreach that I'm suggesting everyone do, which is 100 to 200 messages a week. Last I spoke with him, he has been doing 20 to 30 messages and has been getting tons of opportunities. So ping me on LinkedIn. What do we ask at the end of such peer review volunteer opportunities? For evidence that can directly be presented for EB-1A petition, it can be a letter of participation as a peer reviewer. It can be an official email invitation showing that you were invited to peer review because of your expertise. Yeah. And then if you actually appear at a conference and you speak, then perhaps you could get some photos from that conference as well, and then maybe some sort of letter of participation. Similar to AAA, is there something for cloud or DevOps? Yes, CNCF. CNCF has a ton of events coming up. So many calls for proposals. And another, I haven't shared this publicly, but this is also something I do, and this is extremely useful for people in general. Go and sessionize. People don't know this. Sessionize as a speaker directory. So if you go into the speaker directory and you search cloud computing, you will find a bunch of people who are regularly hosting talks at like conferences. And why you want to do this is because then you will know what kinds of opportunities to actually go for. So for example, this person is in cloud computing. Let's see what kinds of opportunities they are speaking at. Oh, look, they have this coming up. They have this coming up. So now you know that these are the opportunities to go for, because this person who is like really high up in cloud computing has like all these conferences coming up. So this person is speaking at these conferences, and then you get these conferences, and you speak at these conferences, then you can know that this is the bar to try to reach. So yeah, this is something that you can definitely be doing. Any recommendations for becoming an advisor, board member in the AIML? Any resources? So I've been talking about an AI organization. They may have some sort of advisory opportunity coming up. Outside of that, it's just going to come down to doing a lot of outreach to different AI organizations. So there's AI Collective, there's AAA. I actually know someone who was able to get into AI Collective as a chapter lead, who's also a part of this group. But yeah, there's that. There's also AAA. There is Developer Week, advisory boards. There's Lead Devs advisory boards. Lots of advisory boards right now for AIML. AIML is probably one of the most prolific fields right now for profile building. Just tons of opportunities all around. Attending and actually contributing as big mind of field. What matters more? Does just attending and help for a strong profile? Depends on the opportunity. If you attend something that's highly exclusive and that is invite only and that is reserved for top professionals in your field, that can be very strong evidence. But if not, it's probably not going to count. So one example is someone I worked with on profile building for a bit. He was invited to some sort of AI conference that is hosted at MIT that is pretty much invite only. It is invite only. And he was invited and was able to show that only CEOs and directors in AI were invited. That in itself can be strong evidence because he was invited. That's external recognition. He was invited amongst like thousands of other people who applied. So that can count. If it's just something you can just attend, probably not. For getting the recommendation letters, what shall we consider? I mean, does it have to be only from someone who's in cloud or DevOps? I'm assuming you're asking about EB-1A. And if so, it depends on whether you can get someone to comment on whether you have risen to the top of your field. So if it's business outcomes you have created through your work, then just get someone who can comment on the significance of your business outcomes. Doesn't have to be someone in cloud. It could be some sort of business executive within your company or even outside of your company who can provide the context as required to understand the overall significance of your work. Because that is what references are about. References do not have to just come from people who have your particular expertise. They can come from people who have the ability to provide the context that is required for a letter, so that someone can actually understand the significance of your work. Do you actually help profile build personally, one-on-one for a specific field? For what type of consultation charge? What's your success rate? So I don't really. I mean, I have an outreach group, but that's more for like AI and like people in tech. That's where I provide the most individualized attention. But even then, it's not about like telling you exactly what to do. It's more about sourcing opportunities, because I believe that if you get into this mentality of I need to know exactly what to do, you're probably not developing the right skill set to profile build. Because I feel like you should be learning how to identify opportunities on your own instead of having me identify opportunities. I mean, I can do that too, but if you do that as well, then you're going to have a much easier time finding these opportunities. That's why it's like a newsletter. That's why it's a group. It's supposed to help you help yourself. That's why I don't do things where like here are the 10 activities you do these things, and then like you have a strong profile. No, that's not how it works. In fact, I encourage you not to do that. I encourage you to actually enjoy developing yourself professionally, and then as a result, building a profile too. Sure, it is a part of my judging initiative right now, and I can just share more details here, but it's application only, and you will have to apply for it. I'm just sharing the link right now. You will have to apply for it. And yeah, if I think I can work with you, then you will hear back. But again, this is like an application process. And, but yeah. Also, that's why the group exists. You want to be learning from other people as well. You don't want to be you don't want to be in a position where you're just kind of like waiting for like those 10 specific opportunities to pan out. There are some opportunities that I probably don't know about as well that you may find out about just by going to local chapter events, in-person events where you can meet other top professionals in your field. You can also just reach out to top professionals in your field either through LinkedIn, or you can do this within the private group that you have access to right now for $12 per month. You can literally just go into the Substack group and then say like, just introduce yourself, and then do that like every three to 5 days, and then that can be a way to start getting noticed by other people who are doing the kinds of things that you want to be doing, because everyone in that group is pretty much profile building. So that's also something else you want to do. So try to understand how to profile build so you can help yourself, and I can help if I can help with outreach, but I think the newsletter is more about just teaching you how to profile build on your own, especially like yeah, especially the yeah, everyone's profile is there. Next time when we do something like this, can we do a Zoom call or something? I think just talking one-on-one on call would be highly helpful and make things easier. Sure, I can consider that. The thing is, like, I mean, I guess like until we get to a point where it becomes like massive, because I think sometimes it just, I mean, like, sure, we'll look into that. It's just like there are limits to the number of people I can admit into Google Meets, so we'll look into that probably for the next one. But I guess until they get too big, we can do that. Do you need to have written papers before in order to get peer review opportunities? How high is the bar of expertise is the peer review requiring for? It helps a lot to have written papers and be published. A lot of people who are picking out the reviewers are going to ask for your Google Scholar. That is something I've noticed for a lot of opportunities recently. Peer review opportunities, they've asked even the people I've referred to them for their Google Scholars. You also don't, the opportunity industry academia is good, but looks still like more towards people already written or published papers before. No, it's not really for that. But I think, I mean, like, I think you're going for NIW. So I would try to get published more in like blogs and all that instead of that. Like, probably try to get published in blogs or something that's like not as intense as getting published in like journals. Is the reshire program only for landing judging opportunities? No, it is not. It is for judging and other opportunities, so it can be speaking. It's just that everyone keeps asking me about judging for some reason, so I've just focused it on judging, but not really anymore. It's just a bunch of other opportunities as well. Be great idea to have such private meetings bi-weekly, a good motivation for keep on grinding. So if you want to book a private meeting, like a one-on-one, then you can book it through my profile. But I think I'm just gonna like keep these live streams instead because they're just simply far too many people sending me like questions and all. So yeah, but if you need like a private meeting or something, you can just book it through my profile. Anyone else have questions? Also, the initiative is again about showing you exactly what I do for certain fields. Just so happens that everyone's asking about AI, so I'm doing a lot of outreach for AI. And that has led to people finding membership opportunities, like top committee positions within conferences. They have also been able to someone found like a chapter lead position with like a top AI organization. Someone found a top conference committee position. Someone found like a bunch of peer review opportunities with NeurIPS. Some people have found like a bunch of judging through the hackathons that I've introduced them to that are looking for professionals like them. So yeah. Anyone else have questions? All right, let's. Regarding publishing of paper in IEEE and ACM takes lots of time. Any other impactful organization that can be quick to submit and get reviewed? It depends. If you want to go for conferences, then they tend to have a quicker turnaround because they have a conference date. So that's why they probably will need to review the papers before a certain date. But anything that reviews in like a couple of weeks, probably want to be careful there. There are quite a few of opportunities for chapter book writing. Are they considered good credits for authorship criteria? Depends on who is publishing your book. You can also self-publish. Some people have done that, but you will have to find some way to show that it is evidence of external recognition. Now, one person I met, he self-published and then sent his book to like professors, and then they're now using his materials in their classes, so that is actually a good way to get external recognition. But yeah, it can be good authorship evidence, but generally speaking, it just takes a lot of time to publish book chapters. But if it's with a notable publisher, it could be worth looking into. But if you're just going to publish something and then have it sit there, it's probably not great. Do you have people with IT community? It would be helpful for references for people with 10 plus years experience trying to apply. So we did an IT workshop recently, and the IT fellow and fellowship advisor literally said they're not going to just nominate anyone they don't know. The bar is not 10 plus years of experience. They have to know about your experience on like a personal level. So it seems like what you can do is try to get like people you know who know your work to refer you. I think that's where IT is becoming more difficult. You can also contact like current fellows through the IT program. They'll introduce you to fellows if you reach out to them. Anyone else have questions? Like, for example, Springer, Nature, Admiral, IRC are good for chapter books, writing, and reviewing. Springer or Springer, Nature is good. The rest, I don't really know. Every IT is very difficult. Just wanted to understand if someone to know me, I have to at least connect with them through a common channel. Yeah, but that was my understanding initially as well, that they could just help, but a lot of them are not willing to, because you can just get introduced to fellows through IT itself. Like, a lot of people aren't, like, for them it's like if they nominate one person, they're gonna get like 100+ requests like a month. So they're just not doing it. That's what I've seen. Also, IT is getting more difficult, and it's not necessarily something that you have to have. You don't even need membership. That's just something to keep in mind. How long do you generally have seen people taking to build a profile from scratch? People who are junior professionals or mid-level professionals, 3 to 5 years, probably longer. Depends on how strong of a leading or critical role claim you have, or original contributions. You need a strong anchor criterion to have a strong profile. It's not, a strong profile doesn't really come from just judging an authorship and membership. But if you have leading or critical role or original contributions or both, and you have strong claims for both or one, then it can take 6 months to a year. What is the difference of being editors for the books versus just contributing the chapters in the books? Which is better? There's no better, because it depends on what kinds of books. But generally speaking, editing can be good for judging, possibly even membership. Contributing can be good for authorship, but nothing else really. How long for a O-1 profile? 6 months to 2 years, possibly. Depends on whether you can show that you've risen to the top 25% of your field. How deep understanding would the author of paid reference letter, like the 9 experts you mentioned in Substack, be knowing you personally for your work? And we are offering paid reference letters, but want to know the process of getting to know the person. Independent references are not about them knowing you personally. In fact, the thing is, references are not about them knowing you personally, some of them, especially independent references. They are there to review the evidence you provided and provide context. Explain the significance of your work. Explain how they have come to then conclude that you are an expert in your field, or in your case, be able to carry out your proposed endeavor. It's not about knowing you personally. That doesn't really help as much, and you probably already have those perspectives covered. Having someone cover the wider significance of your work based on their own understanding of your field, that could help, especially if that person's really well recognized in your field and they make claims like you have risen to the top of your field because they've been in the field for like 20 years, something like that. Qualifies as critical role. I mean, even at my current entry level role, I pulled off a project with help, did the business of 40 million to my company. Does that count as critical role? Well, if you can show that you played a critical role in generating that 40 million, that could be quite significant. And that is true. You don't have to be in a senior role to have played a critical role, but you will have to somehow demonstrate that. You will definitely have to demonstrate that, and you will be probably compared to people who have done the same thing, except as directors and VPs. All right, let's do a couple more questions. If so, just taking a reference letter from a manager will work? No. Not as simple as that. I would say the bar is higher. You need, like, if you start off as a junior professional, I mean, like, maybe a manager reference letter that clearly explains the connection between your work and these critical and significant outcomes, then possibly. But there's going to be a lot of hesitation around this claim that a junior professional was able to generate 40 million in revenue for a company. The question would therefore be, why are you still a junior professional? Like, why are you in a junior role if you've helped generate 40 million for your company? That's a question I would ask. Like, you're saying that you've done all this great work, but then you're still in a junior role. So it's either your company doesn't recognize you for this work, in which case, how would you even get the references to show you have recognition? Or you actually have not played that critical of a role. I mean, that's a pushback you would get. It was just a project I was put on. Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, so did you play a critical role or not? You would have to show that. All right. I have time for a couple more questions, probably just one or two more questions. Regarding awards, does company level awards count? No. If it's in your company, maybe leading a critical role, but does not count towards the awards criteria. Depends on the awards though. Didn't invest anything new, but I did a lot of pilot work and in-sourced some heavy volume product in-house. Okay, that's the beginnings of maybe something related to leading a critical role. But you would have to unpack that further because it's not immediate. It's not like I've never worked in your field and I don't understand what this means. Like, why is this impressive, significant? That's what an officer is going to ask. Like, why is this significant? All right. Let's try to do this again next week. Thanks, everyone, for joining today's live stream. Hi, everyone. All right, let's get started with some questions if anyone has any. And we can also talk about what you should do after you have, say, strong evidence for judging, authorship, and perhaps even membership. What should you be doing at that point? Well, what you should be doing is finding ways to strengthen the final merits of your profile. And that means targeting more high-profile opportunities. Opportunities where you can show that you have risen to the top of your field. And that should always be your general focus when it comes to EB-1A. If you want to build a strong profile, it's going to come down to presenting a strong argument for how you've risen to the top of your field. A lot of people, they think that once you have a lot of people think that once you have, say, 3 criteria, you automatically have a strong profile, but that's not really the case. A strong profile is not determined by the number of criteria you meet. It is more about final merits. It's more about whether you've actually shown that you've risen to the top of your field. So that's just something that comes up a lot. A lot of people have questions about what to do after they meet 3 criteria. Well, you should be strengthening your argument that you've risen to the top of your field by doing activities where you can show that you have that level of expertise that indicates that you've risen to the top of your field. So that could be going for prestigious memberships. And I'm not talking about general memberships. I'm talking about committee positions, advisory board roles, anything where you can showcase your expertise, particularly to an audience of top professionals in your field. So that's just something that has come up quite a bit. What to do after final merit, after meeting 3 criteria. Should you meet more criteria or should you focus on final merits? I would say if you already meet 4 to 5 criteria, you should be focusing on final merits, not on adding criteria. Don't go for awards. Don't go for media coverage unless you already have strong startings for both criteria. If you've never gotten an award in industry and if you've never gotten media coverage, it's just generally more difficult to get strong evidence for these two criteria. Sundar, yes, we can cover EB-2 and NIW. What would you like to learn? EB-2 and NIW in general, and I've been getting a lot more questions about EB-2 and NIW, probably because perm is taking a lot longer than usual. So with EB-2 and NIW, the first thing to keep in mind is that it is not about how you intend to continue working for your employer or even working in your field. A lot of people seem to think that it is about proving that they will continue to bring benefits to the US by working in their current role. That is not what EB-2 and NIW is about. There are proposed endeavors out there where the person literally claims that they will be doing something that is in a field that they have never been in, never worked in, but that is their intention. They intend to, say, move to the US to bring these certain benefits to this particular field within the US that happens to be an area of national interest. And they have such a compelling proposed endeavor and a plan for carrying out that endeavor that they get approved simply on the basis of that plan. There are lots of these types of NIWs. So that's just something to keep in mind. But feel free to share more questions about EB-2 and NIW if you would like to learn more, Sundar, about EB-2 and NIW, and I can answer some of those profile building questions. Anyone? Okay. Is it true that EB-2 and NIW is getting increasingly difficult to get approved than EB-1? Depends on what you mean by difficult. So EB-1A is about showing how you've risen to the top of your field. EB-2 and NIW is about the 3 prongs of DANASAR and your overall proposed endeavor. The difficulty in EB-2 and NIW right now, based on the lawyers I've spoken to, is that it is just more difficult to know where the bar is for what gets approved and what doesn't. It's not about approval odds. So the thing, everyone keeps thinking about odds for some reason. The difficulty with NIW is that you don't even know what your odds are because officers are issuing RFEs and denials even for strong profiles. So if you're saying overall denial rates, yeah, they are increasing for NIW. So you could then say the odds are lower. But again, it also depends on the kind of profile you're presenting. But with the arbitrariness and the erratic nature of adjudications for NIW, based on the lawyers I've spoken to, and it seems like a lot of law firms are also encountering this issue, even strong profiles are getting denied and not very strong profiles are getting approved. So there's no way to even know where the bar is for NIW. That's where the difficulty in NIW comes in. EB-1A, it's pretty clear what the bar is. You have to show that you've risen to the top of your field and you have to meet 3 criteria. In that sense, if you have a strong EB-1A profile and say you have like 10, 15 years of experience, something like that, and you have a strong leading or critical role claim or even an original contributions claim, then at that point, it's really a question of whether you want to look at both or maybe want to look at just NIW. Generally speaking, a lot of lawyers that I've spoken to still recommend NIW over EB-1A because EB-1A standards are extremely high. That being said, if you have an EB-1A profile already, and some people do have an EB-1A profile, even if they have not been profile building, then yeah, look at EB-1A as well. Yeah, it's not just about approval rates. It's not about odds. There are a few monthly journals that I would like to contribute. IJRAs. Okay, these are the international journals. There's publication fees. Is it okay to target these? I don't know if these are the journals that are being flagged. I have heard that some of these international journals are being flagged. Fees alone do not mean an activity is not worth looking into. If you look at some journals, they're charging $2,000 to $3,000 just for an article processing charge, and we're talking high quality journals. So the fee itself is not automatically evidence that you should be disqualifying an opportunity. It's just with these journals, if I am correctly understanding the names of these journals, they're being flagged for other practices that could be deemed to be fraud, but then don't quote me on that because I don't even know what these journals stand for, but there are a bunch of international journals out there. International journals as in journals with the word international in them, in their names, that are being flagged. But fees alone don't really provide the full picture. Because a lot of even speaking in an IEEE conference, sometimes they charge fees. Doesn't mean it's a low quality opportunity. For product managers, what are some judging opportunities that we could look out for? There are a couple of organizations that I have encountered, like Mind the Product. Product Camp is a pretty new one, but it's run by someone who has written quite a well-known book in product management. There's also Product World. That's a conference, I think. Outside of that, Product That Counts is another one. And then just like a lot of different advisory roles out there for different organizations, or you could even look into advisory roles, like volunteer advisory roles within specific startups. Google Scholar Scopus, which one we should target for authorship and how? Please explain. Honestly, I don't know that much enough about authorship to comment on this particular part. All I know is that you should, if you want to know if a journal is reputable, you will want to see who is on the committee, the editorial committee. You'll want to see who is on the program committee for a conference. You will just want to know if there are university professors from top universities or well-known universities that are reputable. That's just generally what I look for when I'm recommending these kinds of opportunities. If you don't really see that many reputable universities, or you don't even see the program committee itself or editorial board, then I would be more cautious. There is a lot of news that UCS is revoking EB-1A that were approved in past citing predatory journal publications, etc. What are your thoughts? Where is this news? Because from a numerical perspective, at least based on the lawyers I've spoken to, the revocations have been mostly for very obvious fraudulent behavior. It's based on just what I've heard. It's not really about publishing in predatory journals. Predatory journals are just low quality journals. Now, fraudulent journals are another thing. If a journal has been backdating articles or faking citations, then that could be grounds for misrepresentation, especially if you have represented these journals as high quality and have not been doing this to get you your citations. Generally speaking, though, this hasn't been a massive topic with the lawyers I've spoken to, as in actual revocations being issued at scale. Seems like it's only a targeted few people who have a pattern of fraudulent behavior, a pattern of misrepresentation. It's not like everyone who has published in a low-quality journal is getting revoked. I have a patent approved. Do these patent in itself count towards EB-2 original contribution, or do I need to have an organization expressing interest in implementation of my patent? EB-2 has nothing to do with original contributions.
original contributions is an EB-1A criterion. A patent in itself, if it has nothing to do with your work in regards to your proposed endeavor, as in what you intend to do as part of your proposed endeavor, not just for your employer, then yes. But if the patent's not related at all, if it's just something that shows that you will continue to work for your employer, it could actually be not that great for your profile. It has nothing to do with your organization implementing the patent. NIW is not about showing how you intend to work for your company. You want to be as far away from that as possible, because that has been one of the #1 causes of denial, showing that you will only impact your employer, nobody else, as in no other company, not even the field. Curious if fintech product managers might qualify for NIW? Yes, but it is not that. It's more about your proposed endeavor. What do you expect? What do you intend to do in the area of fintech, and how will that bring significant benefits to an area of national interest? I would say fintech is one of those harder spaces, but you would still potentially be able to get something through, but that would depend on what kind of proposed endeavor you present. Anyone else have questions? But yeah, it seems like NIW is very misunderstood right now. It is not about showing how you are extremely experienced in your field. It is not about showing that you have original contributions. It is about showing that you intend, through a proposed endeavor, you intend to bring benefits of national interest to an area of national interest, and you don't plan to just do that by working for your current company or working for a company. You are bringing benefits to the field as a whole, to a field of national interest. If you cannot show that, you are going to have trouble with building a strong EB-1, EB-2 NIW profile. EB-1A criteria do not apply for EB-2 NIW. You can be a very top professional and still get denied for EB-2 NIW because you weren't able to show a proposed endeavor that shows how you will contribute to a field of national interest. Where to get independent expert opinion letter? Couple of sources. One is you can go and ask people you don't know to see if they'd be willing to review your profile. Sometimes that could work. Something else you could do is talk to people in your immediate network, ask them to introduce you to people who they know to see if they might be able to provide some sort of reference for you. You can also pay for them. That is the fastest way, especially if you have an RFE that you need to reply to, then you would want to pay probably to quickly get a letter. If you can't get someone right away, maybe you can, but usually people just pay for a letter if they're replying to an RFE. So just like those are just 3 ways to get a letter. Anyone else have questions? With the current admin, chances for EB-1A approvals and odds. EB-1A seems to have still been the same. It is focused on how you have risen to the top of your field. If you can show that, then you have a strong EB-1A profile. If you cannot, you probably don't. That is the focus of EB-1A, and it seems like it has still pretty much been what it has always been. Do you have any suggestions to a good attorney for EB-1A? Yeah, you can message me on LinkedIn and I'll send you a couple.
I'm also in the process of vetting a couple of more, but yeah, feel free to send me a message on LinkedIn and I can explain in further detail. But when it comes to a lawyer, you generally want to make sure that you're going for a lawyer who fits your needs and is not just someone who has a high approval rate. Because you could have a law firm that only takes on extremely strong profiles, and as a result have a high approval rate. That is not necessarily indicative of whether they will best represent you. So you want to go for a lawyer who fits your needs. So if you know, for example, you have a borderline EB-1A, you probably don't want to approach a firm that is known to just take on extremely strong cases, and they might even not take on your case, but that doesn't mean you don't have a chance. And this is especially the case for NIW. If you only have NIW as your last remaining option, you will definitely want to go for a firm that actually wants to represent you. And that doesn't mean going for the firm with the highest approval rate, because maybe that firm only takes on extremely strong NIWs, or they only take on certain types of NIWs. You want to understand the full picture, and that it's not just about approval rates, is what I'm trying to say. Anyone else have questions? Any other questions? Regarding the AAO decisions that you comment, how to read them, any flag source, not go that route? Not how, I'm not sure what you mean by flagged source, not go that route. How to read them for what USCS initially denied the petition for, because that's the point of an appeal. They're appealing the denial, the initial denial. So you want to focus on how they interpreted the evidence that was presented, so that you can make sure that you potentially avoid making those mistakes when it comes to presenting the evidence as part of your profile. That's how to generally read them, and you just want to read them word for word. That's how I prefer to read them. I don't like to use any sort of like AI generation sort of thing to read them or summarize them. I think it's best to read them word for word, because like my understanding is that each word is included for a reason. Now this applies more for EB-1A and O-1. For NIW, it seems like the AO decisions are also all over the place. They're not really explaining why certain things were denied. But for EB-1A and NIW, for O-1, definitely read them word for word. Thus serving as IAB member in a university and speaking at one of top engineering podcasts backed by IEEE is going to help in final merits or not. Possibly if both of these examples indicate that you've risen to the top of your field, especially based on what you do as an industry advisory board member for a university. You could also get some pretty good references out of these advisory boards. So in that sense, it could help. Both could help with final merits, potentially. Do you have a template of successful EB-2 NIW filing? Well, no. Also, based on what I just said, NIW adjudications are extremely arbitrary. It's not like there is some sort of template now that will work. We are way past that. Last year, maybe there was some sort of templated profile that could have worked. Not anymore. Is BCS membership worth it? Depends on what you mean by worth it. It takes a long time to apply for BCS now to prepare an application. If you have
no other alternatives and that is the only thing you want to focus on, then I would say it is worth it. But if you think it's going to give you a significant boost, fellowship probably, but just general membership, no. Thanks a lot. You're welcome. All right, let's do a couple more questions. See why I'm a new paid member. Do you happen to review a current profile and provide a review? You can message me on LinkedIn and I will send you 3 questions that guide most of my reviews of profiles. Anyone else have questions? Feel free to start to ask more questions. For the EB-1A membership criteria profile building, how should we start and go about? Focus on positions that show that you have risen to the top of your field, and where membership requires members to have outstanding achievements, and that is a requirement. The kinds of memberships that could qualify under this would be memberships where you can show that other members have outstanding achievements, and that is something you're going to want to define as part of any sort of evidence you include. If it's some of the very top professionals in your field, then that is where this kind of argument would be most straightforward. But if it's just something where it seems like anyone with like 5-10 years of experience can get in, then that is going to be questioned, most likely. So you can go for committee positions, industry advisory board positions. You could even go for like advisory roles, committee positions. Yeah, those are the general memberships that I recommend, maybe fellowships, but those tend to be much harder to get. So BCS fellow membership is worth it, right? It can help with membership, yes. It just takes a long time and takes a lot of time to apply for. Is original contribution mandatory and primary criteria? No, unless you're a researcher. Any other questions? Our immediate publications, such as Tech Bullion, Scene, based on my understanding, not very high quality because a lot of people seem to be getting this. It also isn't really, like, why don't you go ask another top professional in your field tell them you got published in Tech Bullion. What is going to be the reaction? That is something you should definitely ask yourself, because chances are other top professionals in your field are probably not going to have even heard of this publication. Thank you. You're welcome. What's the difference between original contribution and scholarly article? Original contributions about, there are a couple of ways to think about it. It's how you show impact in your field through something that you have done and not something you have done as part of your company. For example, maybe you published a paper that helped reshape the industry, or perhaps you published some sort of, maybe you perhaps sat on some sort of like advisory position as part of some industry influencing organization, and then you change the industry as a result. You want to show how your contributions actually had an impact on your industry as a whole. And that could be through the usage of maybe your ideas or your contributions by other companies, or it could be just significant attention, which of course is something you're going to have to define. Scholarly articles is authorship, it's what you publish. So it's like publishing in journals, publishing in technical magazines. It's what you put out there as like written work. Thus, leading a number of resources, people, and organization is any help in final merits. That is going to be probably key to your final merits argument, especially if you are claiming leading a critical role. If you're claiming a leading role, then you'll definitely want to show that you are. You'll also want to see that. You'll also want to show that your leadership indicates that you have risen to the top of your field, that you are a top expert. That is how it can help in final merits. Thank you. You're welcome. On that note, how are news outlets from India seen? If you are published in some of the very top news outlets in India, then those can be seen as quite useful for your profile. But if they're, again, random news outlets, then no, not really going to help. All right, let's do a couple more questions. Regarding panning, trying to show how it's linked to field of expertise is more important than use of the pan. Well, you want to connect usage to your expertise. You ideally want to show a lot of usage from, say, some of the top companies in your field and use that as an indication of your expertise. That can help in both leading or critical role and original contributions, depending on what kind of patent you're talking about. If it's a patent that you developed outside of your work, then probably original contributions. If it's a patent that you developed with other people at work, probably leading a critical role, but you will probably want to show that they're both linked. I can't really imagine a scenario where you wouldn't show that they're linked. That wouldn't really make sense. You're welcome. All right. Thanks everyone for joining today's live stream. I'll be definitely doing more live streams probably next week, if not, probably next week. Thanks everyone. Hi everyone. Let's get started with today's live stream. We're going to talk about a couple of EB-1A topics that have been coming up. One being, how do you not build a generic profile? So one way to avoid building a generic profile is to not fall into the trap of doing activities that you think will automatically help you with building a strong profile simply because other people told you that these are the activities you have to do. I mean, you can probably name a couple of these that are always coming up. But the problem with taking this approach to profile building is, firstly, you end up with opportunities that officers will keep seeing time and time again, and you will just end up with a generic profile because these are the kinds of opportunities that generally apply to a lot of different professionals. Thank you for the kind words. You're welcome. And feel free to ask questions. But going back to what I was saying, you don't want to target opportunities that a lot of people tend to target for their profile. And you probably know what these kinds of opportunities are because a lot of profile builders will be talking about them. They'll be telling you that you have to target them because this person targeted this particular opportunity and got approved.
But if you take this approach, what ends up happening is you just end up with the same kinds of opportunities that everyone else has. And these opportunities will generally not help with your overall case narrative, especially if you've built a case narrative that is very specific to your particular background and to your particular work. If you've done that, then you'll probably not find that these generic opportunities help that much with your overall case narrative. So, what kind of approach should you be taking instead if you want to build the strongest possible EB-1A profile? Instead of just relying on what everyone keeps talking about in terms of opportunities, really dive deep into your field by talking to top professionals in your field, by talking to professors in your field, by getting involved in activities in your field. That's how you will start spotting opportunities that can actually help you with building a strong case narrative. Opportunities that actually are specifically relevant to the case narrative you're trying to build. So that oftentimes starts with first defining your field of expertise and then showing how you've risen to the top of this particular field of expertise. And you can do this by perhaps defining a problem that you have helped solve in your many years of work in your field and that you solve it better than pretty much everyone else in your field. Or perhaps there's some sort of technical expertise that you have demonstrated high levels of and are relatively proficient in this field of expert in this technical area relative to others in your field, or perhaps there's some sort of role that you have played within past companies in your field, past companies and your current company, and that you have played this role much better than everyone else. Assuming you have an understanding of how it is that you've risen to the top of your field, the next step should be targeting opportunities that prove that you have levels of expertise, acclaim, and or impact on your field, such that you have risen to the top of your field. You need to show these levels of acclaim, these levels of expertise, these levels of impact in your field. So, with this definition of what a strong EB-1A profile is in mind, generic opportunities simply just don't really make sense because they tend not to have these markers of expertise, markers of acclaim, markers of impact in your field. They tend to be self-contained opportunities that don't really have affiliations with top companies, that don't really involve top industry professionals in your field, or just professionals in your field if you're an academic, and also don't really have that record of traction of coverage that you typically see in top opportunities in most fields. So just be mindful of the kinds of opportunities you're targeting. And if you want to avoid building a generic profile, stop relying on opportunities that everyone talks about, that everyone says you have to have as part of your profile. Whenever you come across that particular kind of statement, you should definitely reconsider defaulting to just doing that opportunity. Any insights on percentage of approvals, RFE plus approvals from USCIS in last 2 quarters based on conversations with immigration lawyers? The percentage of approvals has definitely gone down slightly to around high 60s based on what one lawyer told me, but that may be because a lot more people are applying. I don't really have particular statistics on RFE plus approvals, but anecdotally speaking, based on conversations with top immigration lawyers, it seems like RFEs are going up as well. So, yeah, approval rates are going down, but probably because there are more applications, RFEs are going up. Anyone else have questions? Anyone else have questions? So something else that I recently talked about in a couple of conversations with EB-1A applicants is that you want to be targeting opportunities that help you find more opportunities. So there are certain opportunities that how the consortium program helps. I assume you're referring to the AI consortium, professional development organization that helps AI professionals with getting visibility in the AI industry, and it's mostly for people who have a demonstrated record of accomplishments and achievements in AI. So there is a review process. It's not like everyone gets accepted. And if you do get accepted, you are considered for opportunities to judge mostly hackathons and also review for their upcoming summit. You will also get considered for opportunities outside of judging hackathons to get involved in in-person opportunities. It really depends on what's coming up with for organizers, but I do know there is one hackathon coming up with a top company that they are hosting. For review, judging, managerial position counts in university hackathons count. Managerial position counts, that sounds like something that you would do within your company, so probably not. And university hackathons depends on the hackathon itself. If the hackathon involves industry professionals, then it could potentially count towards judging. But if it is just a hackathon that involves students, then probably not. Anyone else have questions? So going back to that framework I was talking about, you need to understand how to actually build a strong EB-1A profile before you start effectively profile building. So when you are profile building, just think about what EB-1A is actually about. It is about showing that you've risen to the top of your field. How do you prove that you've risen to the top of your field should therefore be the question that you answer when you are profile building. So with that in mind, you will want to show levels of expertise, acclaim, and or impact in your field that in totality show that you've risen to the top of your field. So the focus should therefore be on proving that you've risen to the top of your field on the basis of expertise, acclaim, and impact on your field. And everything you do should be about proving that you've risen to the top of your field, which is why generic opportunities just simply don't make sense. With this definition in mind, why would you target an opportunity that everyone seems to get involved with, that seems to accept everyone? It simply doesn't really help with your argument that you've risen to the top of your field. So with this strict standard in mind, you will start to notice that a lot of opportunities that everyone talks about, that everyone says works for EB-1A profile building, they just don't really help with showing that you've risen to the top of your field. Whereas more niche, more expertise specific opportunities, those could be potentially far more helpful in showing that you've risen to the top of your field. What's a popular myth that you would like to debunk related to EB-1A, EB-2, and NIW? EB-1A, a popular myth, is the more criteria you meet, the stronger your profile, but not necessarily. A lot of people adopt the approach of meeting as many criteria as possible by doing a bunch of generic opportunities, thinking that because I've shown this particular type of opportunity within my profile, I therefore am building a strong profile. But if you show a particular type of opportunity without any regard for whether it actually proves that you've risen to the top of your field on the basis of a claim, on the basis of expertise, on the basis of your impact in your field, then you are not building a strong profile. You are just doing activities that at most may be helping with showing that you meet a certain criterion, but you are doing nothing for final merits because you haven't proven that this particular opportunity, assuming you're targeting generic opportunities, that is actually helping with showing that you've risen to the top of your field. So don't just do opportunities and think that doing certain types of opportunities to meet as many criteria as possible is actually helping with your profile building. It's probably not. For EB-2 and NIW, a common myth is thinking that all you need to do is show that you are a top expert in your field. That is absolutely not what EB-2 and NIW is about. EB-2 and NIW is about the benefits you bring to the U.S. to an area of national interest. If you are unable to show that you intend, through your proposed endeavor, to bring significant benefits to an area of national interest, then you are not really presenting a strong EB-2 and NIW profile. How many criteria is good to apply? Highly depends on your background, and it's not as simple as how many criteria you need, but generally speaking, it comes down to, based on what I've been hearing from immigration lawyers, most of them are recommending 4 criteria at least, but just keep in mind that the more criteria you have, more criteria doesn't necessarily mean you have a stronger profile. You still have to keep in mind what I was saying about proving that you've risen to the top of your field. More criteria does not necessarily mean that you have proven that you've risen to the top of your field. So when you are building towards these 4 or even 5 criteria, always keep in mind, again, proof of expertise, acclaim, and or impact on your field. Is duration of employment in organizations matter for claiming critical role? It's something you're going to want to have your lawyer look at, because it highly depends on the criticality of the outcomes you were able to influence through your employment with a certain organization. Some people may have been able to make significant contributions to an organization in a matter of, say, a couple of months. It highly depends on whether you can show that your work was, in that duration of employment, connected to driving critical outcomes for your company, for the company you worked at. So that's more of the focus. But of course, if you've worked there for longer, you may be able to show deeper and stronger impact on critical outcomes for your company. Something to just consider when trying to show critical role. Does research activities paper published would be considered for EB-1A visa? As is this mandatory for it? No, none of the above are mandatory. No research activities or papers. Again, it's about showing that you've risen to the top of your field. If you are an industry professional, you can do that without any research, without any papers, because you are an industry professional, and industry professionals are not expected to have done research or published articles. So, no, not mandatory. For EB-2 and NIW, the proof of expertise should be related to proposed endeavor. For e.g. judging, hackathons, etc., should be related to proposed endeavor. Proposed endeavor is what you intend to do to benefit the U.S. through contributions to an area of national interest. Of course, your expertise is going to come into play, because if you know nothing at all about anything to do with your proposed endeavor, it's probably going to be hard to prove that you are actually going to carry out that proposed endeavor. So if you intend to pursue a certain proposed endeavor and your expertise has nothing to do with that endeavor, it is going to be difficult to prove that you intend to pursue the proposed endeavor that you intend to pursue. So if you're talking about activities, yes, they should be related to your proposed endeavor somewhat, at least, or at least there should be some sort of relationship between the activities that you do and the expertise you claim to have that is related to your proposed endeavor. There should at least be some connection between the activities you do and your proposed endeavor. But yeah, you probably want to start with just getting externally involved with activities in your field first, and slowly move toward showing that you intend to pursue the proposed endeavor that you've chosen. How to get recognition from the people? Does the designation of people matter? It's quite a broad question. If you're talking about company recommendation letters, ask them. This is probably something you're going to want to talk to your lawyer about, to a lawyer about. As for, if you're talking about independent references, it's probably going to require that you get involved in activities involving these people who you are considering as independent references. So, for example, speaking at a conference, if you get noticed by a bunch of industry professionals, you could ask them to be your independent references. That's just an example. Anyone else have questions? There are many lawyer firm how to check who is good. You will want to ask about the past clients they worked with. You also want to ask about how they presented the case narratives of past clients, how they handled potential issues with past clients, as in what kinds of challenges did they deal with clients similar to your profile. And also something to keep in mind is that just because a law firm doesn't decide to work with you does not mean you necessarily have a weak case. You will want to speak to a range of law firms, and different law firms have different approaches, and different law firms have different preferences for the kinds of people they want to work with. So if a law firm rejects your case, don't think that you therefore have a weak case. So try to speak to a range of law firms. Who is good is just going to come down to quite a few factors, but how they've handled people with your kind of background in the past, what kinds of questions they ask about your work, whether they're just taking things at face value, just accepting whatever you say and then including it in the petition. You also want to ask about the number of cases they worked on and how many of those cases are similar to your case. So just quite a few questions to ask, but generally speaking, look for a lawyer that you think you would work well with, who actually wants to understand how you've risen to the top of your field for themselves as a layperson, because if they have a strong understanding of how you've risen to the top of your field, chances are they're going to be able to present that in a layperson's light to the officer because they understand it from a layperson's perspective. So try to figure out who's going to be most likely going to be able to do that for you. Don't just look at approval rate, because different firms again have different preferences for the kinds of people they work with. Some firms just work with the strongest possible cases, so they have the highest approval rates. That does not necessarily mean that that firm is the right firm for you. So just something to keep in mind. I'm sure this is a question. Anyone else have questions? Anyone else have questions? So going back to that question about a common EB-1A myth, common EB-1A myths, another one is that you need to publish papers. You don't. The reason is because papers don't automatically show that you've risen to the top of your field. You can publish in generic journals, and that evidence can it just won't really show that you've risen to the top of your field as an industry professional. At most, you're probably just going to show that you have gotten recognition from academics. But keep in mind that a lot of generic journals aren't really read by anyone, really. So you're going to end up with evidence that doesn't really prove anything. It's just going to prove that you published in a journal. But then you're going to get the questions of, okay, you published in this journal. How does this prove your expertise? And you're going to want to go beyond, I just published in a journal and it seems to get articles from other industry professionals. Like, how are you going to prove what the readership is? How are you going to show who else is reading this journal and how that proves that you've risen to the top of your field? You'll probably have a much easier time showing that a particular publication is high quality if you target industry publications that are not generic, that have been around for a long time, that are immediately recognizable in your field. And those kinds of publications will tend to have media kits. They will tend to describe in detail who the readers are. And that is going to be instrumental in your argument that you're risen to the top of your field, because if you can show that these publications that you have gotten published in are read by top industry professionals in your field, and you have the data to back it up because these publications actually collect that data and share it publicly, you will just have a much easier time showing that your publications can count as evidence that you've risen to the top of your field. So you're helping you're strengthening your authorship claim, and you're also potentially strengthening the final merits of your profile. So notice that it's not about the types of activities that you target, it's more about the kinds of evidence you can show for an activity that you do. Anyone else have questions? Anyone else have questions? So just sharing my resources in the chat as well. But yeah, for those of you who don't already know, I run a newsletter that has a bunch of resources that can help you with building the strongest possible EB-1A profile. I also share resources for EB-2 and NIW and O-1 as well. But it's based on what I've been noticing a lot with what's been going on in profile building. A lot of people seem to be following insights that aren't really based on conversations with lawyers or EB-1A recipients. It just seems to be based on what other people are saying. So I've shared resources, and I've shared resources that can help you with building the strongest possible EB-1A profile. So I share examples of profile building opportunities. I also run a private group within my newsletter where people work with each other actively to find opportunities, to collaborate on opportunities, to share insights. And I also run virtual events pretty regularly with top immigration lawyers. And I just also share insights in general from conversations I've been having through regular articles within the newsletter. So yeah, let's just check out the link in the comments that I just shared. But yeah, what documents mainly required to submit to lawyer for EB-2 and NIW? Does recent graduates eligible? Possibly, but it really depends on your proposed endeavor. If you don't have any experience at all, then that might be something that is going to get questioned because, again, it's about whether you are going to be pursuing this proposed endeavor that you intend to pursue. If it's something that is supposed to bring tremendous benefits to the US, you will probably need to have some sort of level of expertise related to your proposed endeavor. And recent graduates may not have that, but it really depends on your proposed endeavor. If you do have that, then it won't really matter if you're a recent graduate or not. And this may apply to, for example, people who have had many years of experience already before doing a master's. Those kinds of people may have a lot of industry expertise already. So that applies to your particular scenario. Then you might want to rely on past work experience as a way to show that you already have a level of expertise that can help with your proposed endeavor. So just some points to keep in mind. Great. All right. Everyone for joining today's live stream. Everyone, get started with today's live stream. Anyone have questions that they want to ask? Anyone have questions? Feel free to start asking questions in the chat. Anyone have questions? So I think one thing I want to just start off by covering, and this is just from insights from speaking to an immigration lawyer a couple of days ago about EB-1A, is that EB-1A continues to be all about showing how you've risen to the top of your field. There still seems to be a very common misconception about how EB-1A is about meeting as many criteria as possible. Really not what EB-1A is about. You don't build a strong EB-1A profile by showing a long list of activities. You build a strong EB-1A profile through a strong argument for how you've risen to the top of your field. And to start doing that, you have to first define what your field is, and then you might want to think about the kinds of activities that you can do, which may or may not fall within the criteria, activities that you can do to show how you've risen to the top of this field that you've chosen. That is what EB-1A profile building is about. Of course, you still need to meet the 3 criteria threshold, and you probably want to be targeting 4 criteria at this point. But if you start off with the criteria and then think about your field of expertise, what usually ends up happening with this kind of profile building approach is that you do a bunch of random activities that don't really point to a specific field of expertise. I'll give you a really common example. So a lot of people are targeting academic fellowships, peer reviewing, and random journal articles. So let's say they're a director in an AI company, and then they happen to come across what everyone talks about, which is usually these fellowships definitely help with their EB-1A, peer reviewing for these actually conferences definitely helps with EB-1A, and then publishing in these random journals definitely helps with EB-1A, and then they do all of these activities. You may have evidence for judging authorship and possibly membership, but not. Let's say you have linear critical role judging and authorship. That's not really a strong profile, because if you look at what you've done, you've just done a bunch of activities without really thinking about how they actually show that you've risen to the top of your field. I'm not saying these activities don't really help at all. If you peer review for some top conferences, publish in, say, some top journals, perhaps you can make some sort of argument about how doing those activities indicates that you've risen to the top of your field. It is possible. Say the journal you got published in helped you showcase your specific expertise in regards to the work that you've done for many years, and it's related to your linear critical role claim. But usually I don't really see that. What I see is just someone publishing random articles in random journals, and that evidence isn't really connected to their argument for how they've risen to the top of their field. So people that I speak to, they usually just come to me and say, I've done this, I've done that, I've judged these, I've judged a couple of these hackathons, I've published in these journals that top professionals in their field have probably never heard of. Do I have a strong profile? And all you really need to do is ask if you have actually presented a strong argument for how you are a top professional in your field. And chances are, if you just picked the 2 to 3 activities that everyone talks about in the EB-1A space, probably haven't done that. It's like saying you want to show that you are a top AI professional. Let's say like this, you solve like a specific problem in AI and you're very good at it. And then you back up that argument with tangentially related AI fellowships, judging a couple of AI hackathons that aren't really prestigious. Like they're like okay hackathons, but they aren't really sponsored by top companies. There's no affiliation with prestigious names. It's just something that you came across. Would a top professional in your field of expertise look at those activities and then conclude that you are a top professional on the basis of that evidence? Probably not. Not saying that it's absolutely not going to help. I'm just saying that if you had a field of expertise in mind first, you could have started off with, okay, this is my field of expertise. I am an AI professional that is really good at solving this particular problem. How can I make sure that the activities I do help back up this argument? Okay, I might need to target prestigious opportunities. Why? Because I can show that I was sought after for recognized opportunities in my field, and then I can potentially present evidence through some sort of confirmation from the organizer or some sort of email confirmation or some sort of invitation to show that I was invited on the basis of my expertise in solving this particular problem in AI. I'm not saying that every single activity is going to lead to that kind of evidence, but it does help to be able to find that kind of evidence. And that is probably also why I talk about, and that's also why you hear me talk about, that's also why you hear me talk about speaking at conferences. Speaking at conferences it's something you definitely want to look into because it's strong evidence that you were invited on the basis of your expertise to talk about a topic that is probably going to be related to your field of expertise, or else why would they have invited you to that conference? That's why conference speaking opportunities, even though they don't really fall within any of the criteria, possibly original contributions, but it really depends, it can still be strong evidence that you've risen to the top of your field. And that's how you want to be thinking about your evidence. Whether it can be used as evidence that you've risen to the top of your field, and a lot of the activities you hear that everyone seems to be targeting, they probably don't really fall into this bucket of helping you show that you've risen to the top of your field. Probably because they tend to be very generic, catch-all, broad-brushed opportunities. So, yeah, that's just something to keep in mind for EB-1A, and this is also relevant for O-1. Anyone have questions? Anyone else? Well, anyone have questions? Okay. Yeah. I just realized that. Yeah, I'm live on both platforms right now. Yeah, I'm live on Substack and LinkedIn and YouTube. I mean, I muted the LinkedIn and YouTube side of things. But yeah, thanks, Sai, for telling me. But yeah, let me just repeat what I was saying then. For NIW, it's about what kinds of benefits you can bring to an area of national interest, and then whether you are the person to bring about those benefits. If you can prove that you are that person, then great. You have probably a strong profile, but it again will depend on many other factors. Also, NIW approval rates are still quite low right now, have gotten lower. Yeah, so there's something to keep in mind. For judging, don't do multiple judging. So yeah, these are questions from the Substack live stream, by the way. But for judging, don't try to cram all your judging into a couple of weeks or even a couple of months if you can avoid it. By doing that, any sort of cramming is going to potentially trigger suspicions. That's just what I've heard from lawyers. That if you can avoid cramming all your profile building into a couple of months, then don't do that. But if you can't, there's some sort of urgency. Of course, there's really nothing you can do. But even then, you don't need like 50 judging opportunities, which is actually, I've come across this like every now and then where people do like 50 to 100 judging opportunities. It's really not necessary. But if you think it can help show that you have gotten significant acclaim as a recognition for your expertise, and that's why you're getting frequently invited, and these are actual opportunities, then might actually help. How to choose the law firm? Don't just focus on approval rates. Focus on other factors like, are you actually working with a lawyer who is interested and familiar with your field based on the people that they have worked with who have similar backgrounds to you? You don't want to just work with a law firm that has high approval rates, because approval rates don't tell the full story. You could just be talking to a law firm that only takes strong cases. So again, that's really up to you as to whether you want to work with this kind of law firm, but just don't take approval rates as the only piece of data to consider. There are other things like, have they worked with people with your background? What's their general approach? You might want to ask about like things like case narrative as well. It just comes down to also whether you're comfortable with the lawyer that you're interacting with. And it might take more than one consultation. That's also something else to take into account. Also, how frequently you want to hear from your lawyer. Lawyers just don't like to reply to emails immediately, or don't really like it when they're getting pinged very often. I understand that this is quite a taxing and anxiety-provoking process, but some lawyers just don't like to be on standby when it comes to answering emails. So that's just something else to keep in mind as well. Like communication expectations. Some lawyers might want you to check in like every few weeks. But if that's not something you like, as in you need to hear from your lawyer like every 2 days or 3 days, which is like fine as a preference, it's just that you want to make sure that your lawyer is also on the same page. Because if not, you're going to have a lot of issues communicating with your lawyer. So something else to consider when picking a lawyer. So as you can see, it is not as simple as approval rates. Anyone else have questions? Anyone else have questions? Will you review my profile? Well, depends on what kind of review you want. If you want like a profile building call where I review your entire profile over a call, you can book a profile building call through the link on my profile. But if you want to share details like right now in the comments, feel free to do that, and I can briefly take a look. Yeah, all you really need to understand about EB-1A is that it's about showing how you've risen to the top of your field. The strength of your profile is going to come from whether you've actually made a strong argument for how you've risen to the top of your field. Also, other people can review your profile, as in you can ask other top professionals in your field if they think you are a top professional in your field. Anyone else have questions? How many scholarly articles do you need? Probably 2 to 3 examples of authorship, but when it comes to scholarly articles, you can also look into industry publication articles, not just journal articles. You can also look at technical magazines. So I would say 2 to 3, probably more, if you think that authorship is going to be a great source of evidence for showing how you've risen to the top of your field. It just highly depends on how you want to be handling your profile. How can I get opportunity to get Q1 journals to review? I don't hold PhD. Q1 journals, probably difficult without a research background. I mean, you can try to reach out to editors of these journals, but if you want to really review for research, you probably want to target conferences that have both a research and industry component. So if you look at a lot of the upcoming AI conferences, you will see that a lot of them, especially the IEEE and ACM ones, you will see that a lot of them have some sort of industry track. And if they have an industry track, you can ask the members of the technical program committee, so these are the people who are already reviewing, you can ask them if they are willing to consider you as someone who can review for them. So those chairs tend to be more open to accepting industry professionals for review opportunities, because if it's an industry track, they're probably going to want industry professionals. I mean, that's not always the case, but you'll just have to ask them, and you will just have to do the outreach. It's just, there's no way around it. You're just going to have to reach out to these people. So go on one of those conference pages, look for the general contact email, and then when emailing them, and I'm telling you exactly what's helped someone who actually got approved for EB-1A last year. And what she told me was she used a specific template that apparently was in one of my posts. And she used it to get 50 to 100 peer review opportunities. It's not like she just sent 50 to 100 emails and got 50 to 100 peer review opportunities. She probably sent like over like 300-400. But what I'm telling you is that that is the actual process for getting these kinds of review opportunities. You have to go on conference pages, find the general emails, and then email all of them. And in that email, lay out your industry expertise, what you can offer as an industry expert that you think they will need, and then probably ask to get onto some sort of call just so you can further show your expertise. That's what you'll want to be doing. So yeah, it is possible without a research background. It's possible without a PhD. I'm just saying that it's quite difficult. But it is possible because a lot of these conferences, especially for AI, you'll see that a lot of them have industry tracks. And when you have an industry track, that means you are getting submissions from industry professionals, and usually those submissions are reviewed by other industry professionals. Then it just comes down to how many emails you send and how many conferences you target. Anyone have questions? Anyone else have questions? Anyone have questions? You're welcome. Also, for those of you who are interested, I am still thinking about starting a new profile building group that focuses on providing continual feedback on your profiles for those of you who want that regular cadence of feedback and want top EB-1A recipients and lawyers involved in that process. So I'm still actively talking to EB-1A recipients, still talking to lawyers just to find the right lawyers who can help with providing that asynchronous feedback. So it's my understanding, you're not understanding, but it's been my observation that profiles that have lawyers involved, profile builders who involve lawyers in their profile building as early as possible tend to build stronger profiles. So I'm just trying to replicate that experience on a more within a group. So yeah, here's the form for those of you who are interested. I'm still thinking about this initiative, but the idea is going to be for people to provide monthly reports about their progress. So every month you lay out what you want to be doing for your profile building and what you intend to do. And then that entire month is dedicated to doing what you said you were going to do. So say with, I don't know, like in April, you want to get one peer review opportunity. Focus just on getting that one peer review opportunity. So we would, as a group, it could be as a group, but you would focus on maybe sending like 20 emails a day to conference committee chairs, to professors, perhaps, and then you do that for 30 days. And then we see what kind of progress you made. And then throughout those 30 days, you would be sharing the emails that you got back, or like which emails have been working, which emails have not been working, testing on different formats. So it's going to be a group that's going to be very focused on driving towards actual profile building, where you identify something that you want happen, and then we lay out a path together as a group, not just from me, but from maybe EB-1A recipients I'll be having join, lawyers as well, having them also help you get to what you actually want to do. Because the alternative that I've been seeing with a lot of these, like this is just my view, but you can't just build a strong profile with generic opportunities. And even if someone helps you with landing opportunities, it's not like they can land the most prestigious opportunities for your specific field of expertise. That's been quite rare. They might be able to help you land prestigious opportunities, maybe a couple, but if you want to go that extra mile and build the strongest possible profile, you will have to be comfortable with doing a lot of outreach on your own. And what I can do there is it can be like a do with you sort of format. I can provide insights and perhaps guidance throughout this process and tell you what is working well and what is not. And then lawyers can chime in and say, this is what's helping your profile, this is what's not going to help your profile. But when it comes to actually having those conversations with other job professionals in your field, maintaining those interactions, doing those follow-ups, that's all going to come from you. Because say like a top conference organizer is not going to want to talk to me, generally speaking. Like but they're probably going to want to talk to you because you're the person who's going to be speaking at that conference. So 9 times out of 10, you're actually much better off driving that interaction. Like I can still help in some ways, but it just helps a lot. I feel like if you're also comfortable with doing this on your own, doing this kind of outreach and showing, all right, yeah, I'll show the form there as well. But yeah, if you're comfortable with doing outreach on your own, and I've seen this up close as well. I've seen people, because I used to work with people on a more individualized basis. I would see people go from not knowing anything about EB-1A profile building to after 6 weeks actually building their profiles through outreach. And now they're landing all kinds of opportunities that I have not even heard of, but are clearly recognized in their field. So that's just something to keep in mind. But yeah, this is going to be separate to the outreach initiative, which is where I actually help with landing, judging, and speaking opportunities. But as you'll probably see, I'm very focused on AI-related opportunities, sometimes general tech opportunities, but it's gone to a point where I'm getting people from all fields, like a lot of different fields, reach out asking if they can be helped. And I just think that really the most effective way is to just share insights and outreach through a group. Also, in the group, I also want to see people helping each other out, applying what they've learned, showing what's been working for them. That's, yeah. But still putting this group together. Anyone else have questions? Anyone have questions? All right, if no one else has questions, thanks everyone for joining today's live stream. Hi everyone, sorry for the slight delay. Great, let's get started. So this topic comes up pretty frequently. It is, at least for me, a lot of people ask me how to find a lawyer. And I've been thinking a lot about how to find a lawyer. And it's not as simple as what a lot of you think it is. I mean, when I'm talking to a lot of you tell me that you tend to look at approval rates and pretty much it, approval rates. Maybe some of you ask questions about whether a particular lawyer has handled your type of case with your type of background, but I think it's actually a lot more than that. So generally speaking, at least based on some of the law firms I've spoken to, what I like to look at is performance metrics. I like to see, firstly, if that law firm is mindful of its own performance. That is my primary focus, because if performance isn't being measured, if there are no metrics, if there's no data, what that is really saying is the law firm hasn't really thought about its own performance. I mean, like, of course, there are law firms that maybe have just started in EB-1A, NIW, and O-1 and haven't really handled EB-1As, NIWs, and O-1s. And as a result, maybe they don't have enough data to show. But you want to see, just generally speaking, how they react to this question of what are your performance metrics? For example, how long does it take for you on average to answer a client? That is a question I've been asking a lot of law firms, because I want to know if they are mindful of their own performance in regards to how quickly they respond to client inquiries. Because sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, how quickly you answer a client and then how quickly you move on a particular development within a case can potentially affect the client's case. I'm not saying for every single situation, but it's just something to be mindful of. So, but going back to the point, it's about asking if they have performance metrics, not just have they handled people with your particular background, but sure, approval rate, how many of these cases do you handle? These are just questions I ask to surface performance metrics. How many of these cases with people with my background do you handle? What's your approval rate for those particular people? It would be great to get a subset of an approval rate for your particular type of person. And this really unpacks this, like a lot of law firms call like 90% or something like that, but you don't know what kinds of cases they're taking on. If they are taking on slam dunk cases and you have something that's not very fitting of their particular archetype, that approval rate may not apply to you. So do you have like segmented approval rates? That's another question, a more nuanced question you might want to be asking. Another question you want to ask, of course, is how long does it take for you to reply to clients on average? What's the average response time for client inquiries? So you want them to quote in business days, of course. And you also want to ask how long it takes to process a case from start to finish. That is also another key metric you should be tuning into, because if you don't ask those questions and you just ask approval rate, a lot of context is actually hidden or not surfaced at all. So while a law firm might say I have a 91 to 93 or 95% or 99% approval rate, firstly, you don't know what kinds of cases they're taking on. Secondly, what if it's a 99% approval rate, but it takes like 12 months to do a case because they're very particular and that's how they get their 99% approval rate, but you need things done in like 3 months? Or you're just the kind of person who likes to hear from your lawyer after like 2 business days and not 10 business days. And yeah, Because if you want to develop an attorney-client relationship that actually works for you, you want to make sure you're surfacing all these metrics as early as possible so that you have the full picture of how your attorney-client relationship is going to be like. So this is just something I wanted to talk about because a lot of you have been asking questions about how to find a lawyer. This is my approach. Given the law firms that have approached me, I like to vet them in this particular way. And yeah, it's more nuanced than just, hey, what's your approval rate? And on profile building, a lot of law firms have also been getting questions about whether they help with profile building. Most law firms say no. And that, I mean, like that's like a topic for another day, but you also want to make sure that your law firm is actually engaged with your particular field. I mean, this is my view. I'm not saying that all law firms should be like this. I'm just saying that it really helps to have a lawyer that's actually in tune with your particular field, as in they're engaged with your kind of work. They kind of know what you're talking about. They know the comparative context within which to place you so that they can actually argue, this is for EB-1A and O-1, that you've risen to the top of your field, or for NIW, that you're actually contributing to an area of national interest as related to your work. If you have a lawyer who's just very out of tune with your field, how do you expect them to argue your case properly? So that is how this ties into profile building. If they haven't even shown much of an interest in developing your profile, then maybe that's not really the law firm you want to engage with. Because also, some law firms will say, I'm going to help with profile building, but they may not be helping that much in actually, say, landing opportunities. So, I mean, like, this is, again, my view. But if a law firm can help with landing opportunities and vetting those opportunities for you, I think that actually helps a lot of people who are 6 to 9 months away from filing, who are not particularly there. They have a strong leading critical role. They may have this high salary claim, but they not, or maybe even original contributions, but they just don't have anything else coming up. That is the type of case that is not particularly ready. Could be ready if you have 3, including original contribution, but could be stronger a little bit more with a bit of judging and authorship. And if you are in that particular situation, I think that, again, this is my opinion, I think that you should engage a firm that actually takes an interest in your profile building. Because it shows that that law firm is interested in developing your case to a point where you're ready, instead of just turning you away and kind of letting you figure things out for yourself. Because up until, I don't know, like recently, a lot of law firms are just turning away pretty strong cases, I think, that are, well, not turning away, not saying like don't work with us, but more so, you're not quite there. You need a bit of judging. You need a bit of authorship. You need a bit of membership, but you kind of have to figure it out for yourself what it is. If you could find a firm that actually helps you with getting to that point, I think that tends to be just like a good indicator that is a firm you want to work with, because they're very in tune with, they understand what people are going through right now. And what people are going through right now is they want to profile build. Most people have not profile built. I mean, like, there's this term like of organic profile building thrown around all the time, but like organically and inorganically, they haven't profile built. They've spent like the last 20 years, 10 years focused on their work. And now they're being told about this profile building thing. If you want to make things as smooth as possible, work with a law firm that actually wants to help you get to a point where you are almost ready to file, as in a month away, or pretty much ready to file, and not just sitting at 6 to 9 months and just kind of like staying in that condition. Because I've seen this happen all the time. Like, people come to me like a year later and say, hey, like, I haven't profile built. And I'm like, we spoke like a year ago and you said you were like 6 months away, and we looked at your profile and you are 6 months away, but you haven't done any judging, any membership, any authorship. And they said they've spoken to all these lawyers. They've gone to like, right. I think this is also because profile building is pretty much misunderstood. A lot of people think that profile building is about reading the AAO decisions, reading all these AAO decisions, which are delayed, by the way, by like 6 to 8 months. So it's like 6 trends from 6 to 8 months ago. there is a delay in AO decisions. People focus on approval rates, people focus on trends, but they don't actually do profile building. They don't show that they don't do activities that show that they've risen to the top of their field. And I think it's because they think talking to lawyers is profile building. They think consuming AO decisions is profile building, but that is not profile building. So going back to the initial point, you want to work with a lawyer who understands that you have these problems with profile building, that you're not actually profile building, that you're not actually surfacing opportunities, and tells you all this talk about like AO decisions, approval rates, and trends. That's not profile building. You need to do this, this, and this, and we will go help you find someone who is that. And that is the direction I'm starting to go in, where I have this outreach initiative. I've helped land 143 opportunities as of now in around 2 months, including hackathons sponsored by OpenAI, Anthropic, AWS hackathons. So there's helped land over 20 NERPs peer review opportunities just by finding the peer reviewer forums, because I still think it's a visibility problem of matching top professionals with top opportunities. I've started to talk to more law firms and working with one right now where I'm actually in tune with the profile building and asking them if this is something that someone should be doing. With this kind of dialogue, the client, the applicant, actually gets to have someone who has experience in their field actually profile build, actually build up their professional. It also helps them with their professional development, and have a lawyer check it throughout the way until, if they were 9 months away from filing, every single month of those 9 months, they are in tune. They're in tune with the profile building. So it's like the lawyer profile builder actually getting to a point where the lawyer is comfortable with the profile that's being built, and the profile builder is also comfortable in helping. And then it's like a shared arrangement where like all three parties are focused on profile building. So that's just something else you want to think about when you're talking to law firms, whether they have that piece in place. Because if they don't, what they're essentially, again, this is my view, what they're essentially saying is the question that I think frustrates a lot of people, which is, I think you should profile build, but I don't know what you should be doing to build your profile. You're 6 to 9 months away from filing, but I have no idea how to get you to 3 months away from filing. And you kind of just like figure it out for yourself, and we figure it out, let's do another consultation. And a lot of people end up in a situation where a year later, they go back to the same lawyer and they're like, hey, like, I've done all these things, do they count? And the lawyer's like, no, you're still 9 months away from filing. I think that's extremely frustrating if you're a profile builder. And that's something I work extensively on with people in my outreach initiative. We are focused primarily on profile building, on closing the gap of the 9 months, of the 12 months. That is the focus. It's on closing the gap so that you can actually get to a point where you are ready to file, not just always in this state of like, what should I be doing to profile build? I've done these activities, and then you go to the lawyer and the lawyer's like, oh, it doesn't count. I bridge the gap. I talk to the lawyers and say, does this count? Does this close the gap? So I think that's where we're moving in right now with finding law firms and profile building. But yeah, okay, that was quite a bit, but that's just my take on this topic. Feel free to start asking questions. We'll be around for like 10, 15 minutes to answer questions. Anyone have questions? Any questions? Anyone have questions about this topic? Or I can go into really common questions that I get, which is number one, how do you ask lawyers about profile building? Well, lawyers can only kind of tell you what works if you give them enough context. So you have to provide as much context as possible that makes sense to them, someone who has never been in your field before. And that is why the question of whether they have handled, whether a particular lawyer has handled a certain type of profile that is very similar to yours, that's where things really do matter. Because if you don't, I mean, I'm not saying this has to happen, but if you work with a lawyer who doesn't really know much about your field, then how do you, I mean, they could be really good at researching your field, but how do you expect them to really present the comparative significance of your work? We do have a question. Shmail asks, how, would you please clarify on media coverage? Media coverage is something I do not suggest, and I do not suggest because it is very difficult to secure. That being said, I have helped with media coverage with members of the Outreach Initiative, but it wasn't something I was focused on. It just happened to get media coverage, the opportunity. So I never really asked for it. I didn't really push for it. It just kind of popped up. So if that's kind of media coverage you can get, that's great. But if you're actively pushing for it, actually actively paying for it, then no. I just don't think it makes sense. If you're a top expert, why do you have to pay for media coverage? But yeah, media coverage is difficult. You can try to get it by reaching out to a lot of people, but just not something I suggest. Anyone else have questions? Yeah, I don't know why everyone's focusing on media coverage. It's probably one of the most difficult criterion to target, and it really makes no sense to target because most of you industry professionals do not, it just makes no sense. Like, think about it. Who in your peer group has media coverage? Who, just look at your colleagues, like who actually has media coverage and what is their profile? Anyone else have questions? What is the best way to evaluate a profile for EB-1A? Well, it usually starts with a leader in critical role or original contributions or both. Do you have a claim for whether you've risen to the top of your field based on the many years of work that you've done or the type of work you have done? And then it's looking at whether you have met, so it's criteria and final merits. Final merits actually comes from your anchor criterion and then also the other criteria. If you can show strong prestige factors for the other criteria, it's not a must. You can show strong final merits on the basis of your anchor criteria, as in leading a critical role or original contributions. Final merits means have you risen to the top of your field? That is the argument you are making. Strong final merits means a strong argument for how you've risen to the top of your field. Not very strong final merits means you have not made a strong argument for whether you've risen to the top of your field. So how you should evaluate your own profile is, do you have the anchor criteria or anchor criterion? And then next, do you have at least two other criteria to meet the three criteria threshold And then do you think the other two criteria are needed to make the strongest possible argument that you've risen to the top of your field? Now, if you're the CEO of like a massive US company, then probably not really needed because your final merits are already extremely strong. Because you can make a strong argument that you've risen to the top of your field simply on the basis of your position as the CEO of a top company. Now, if you don't have that and you have like, I don't know, like a mid-level position or even a senior position, comparatively speaking, and by the way, you're going to be compared to other people in these positions. Comparatively speaking, does it help to have prestige factors in your other activities? Probably, because the argument that you've risen to the top of your field is not completely solidified by your leading a critical role or your original contributions or both. So yeah, in that case, prestige factors for judging or membership or authorship could really help bring out that argument that you've risen to the top of your field. Because it's not, the point is that it's not immediately evident that you've risen to the top of your field. Narash asks, if we don't have citations for publications, how can we support in our profile? Citations are not needed unless you are some sort of professor or some sort of researcher. Citations don't really help as much as you think they help unless you are highly cited by industry professionals. I mean, there is a context where your patents are highly cited because of your industry work. That is a context that does apply. But if you don't have citations, they are not a focus. It's just not the focus. It makes no sense. If you're trying to show that you've risen to the top of your field as an industry professional and you're showing academia as your profile building strength, it just makes no sense. Unless you get cited in some top research conferences and you have some sort of research element in your profile and it somehow ties into your industry profile. But if it doesn't and it's just out of place and it looks like you're just cramming things in and forcing things, it will show. Which is why I don't suggest people go for citations at all. I don't know where this came from. Rishesh asks, if there are two different fields of work, do you think it's possible to create a strong case for EB-1? Yes, because some people work in 10 different fields. I work with someone in, for example, in the Irish Initiative, or someone in ERP. He's worked in like 6 different fields. So what are we working towards? We are showing that he is a top applied ERP expert because he's been able to apply very high-level ERP concepts to produce significant outcomes in multiple different fields. There, that is one way to tie two different fields of work together. It's this, again, another misconception. Like people think field of expertise means domain. Field of expertise could mean a type of technical expertise. But yeah, that's just one way. Another way is to show that you are progressing in your level of technical expertise. You have applied technical expertise and say, I don't know, like energy. And then now you see AI and energy as the future. So then now you have started to develop as an AI professional to help with your energy work, and both combined together makes you a top energy professional. That's 2 different fields, but it's showing that you're actually progressing in your experience, progressive experience. That's what you're showing. Anyone else have questions? Anyone have questions? How important is the speaking opportunity in our profile? It makes sense. Well, it depends on the type of speaking opportunity. If it is, say, a very prestigious conference where you're speaking to an audience of executives. Also, audience matters. It's not about numbers. Just in general, everyone talks about like millions of readers or something. Maybe that's why people go for paid media coverage, which makes no sense. Because millions of readers could be millions of people who are not in your field. If you have millions of people who are not in your field just clicking on some website, that is not strong evidence that you have risen to the top of your field. So it depends on who's actually in the audience for a speaking opportunity. If it's like a concentrated group of, say, engineering managers, and you're an engineering manager, and it's an invite-only conference, that's a pretty strong piece of evidence. Because you were invited to speak at an exclusive conference for your type of professional and only the top professionals in your field. But speaking does help with final merits. It helps in showing that you've risen to the top of your field. Why? Because you're applying your expertise and sharing your expertise and influencing the dialogue within your field, thought leadership. You're getting people to change their behavior, do things that actually help progress the field. That's final merits. That helps your argument that you're risen to the top of your field. Because why? Top leaders, top CEOs in your field probably do that. Top leaders in your field probably speak at conferences. They probably speak at industry panels. So you doing that as well helps strengthen your argument that you're risen to the top of your field. That is why speaking is final merits. How is 30 under 30 treated? Is it a solid recognition for EB-1A? I don't have enough context around 30 under 30 because I don't know how it works on the inside. I mean, it has mainstream recognition, so maybe it could help, but I wouldn't completely rely on it because based on what I've heard, I don't know for sure what's going on the inside. A lot of people get on this list. That's just what I've heard. Like but honestly, I don't have enough context, so I don't want to. Yeah. Anyone have questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions. Anyone else have questions? I can stay on for like 2 more minutes. All right, if there are no other questions, thanks everyone for joining. Probably do another one of these in a couple of days. Thanks everyone.